Chapter 29. Reason Story. Sunday afternoons in the Arlott household were notoriously lazy. Since Amin spent most of his time discussing strategies with high-ranking Survey Corps officials or working with Hanji in the lab, he rarely had time to enjoy the simple things in life, so he made a point to set aside some time to do so every Sunday. This included but was not limited to window shopping in the market, taking a leisurely stroll outside on nice days, or reading one of the many books on his shelves. He often looked forward to those quiet moments all week. So when he woke up one Sunday morning in late April with Annie next to him, he decided that the whole day would consist of nothing but quiet, lazy moments. As soon as the woman had been freed from prison, she had thrown her arms around him and refused to let him go. She hadn't exactly cried, but Amin could swear that he had heard some soft whimpers. Rainer had then wrapped his large arms around both of them, and Berthold, his anxiety forgotten, had gently massaged Annie's shoulder to reassure her that everything was okay. They had stood there until a military police guard told them to leave, and even after they had loaded into the carriage, Annie still desperately clung to Amin but refused to meet any of the men's eyes. The week since then had been long. Annie had been living with Amin, not wanting to be by herself even in her own home. Amin didn't have a problem with that and had welcomed her, but he worried for her mental health. She barely left the house, spending most of her time in bed. For the first few days, Amin didn't question her, but he was starting to want to push her back into the world. While he certainly didn't mind the idea of permanently living with her, he did not like the idea of her wasting the rest of her life in his home. On that lazy Sunday morning, he gently nudged her shoulder and kissed her forehead until her eyes flooded open. He smiled at her and said, "Good morning," to which she muttered a reply. "Come on, out of bed," he continued, pushing the covers off. "It's a beautiful day, we should go out." Annie squirmed uncomfortably. "Don't wanna." "Annie," Amin sighed, slumping over, "come on." She huffed at him and rolled over so her back was facing him. "No." Now the blonde was starting to get exasperated. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood, stretching his arms out. "At least come have breakfast with me at the table," he asked as he headed towards the bathroom. He heard an agreeing grunt and smiled. Baby steps were still steps. Breakfast was quiet. Amin normally wouldn't have minded except that Annie wasn't eating nearly as much as she should have been. In fact, she hadn't eaten that much since being released from prison. She was already small, so the change in her body wasn't obvious, but Amin had a feeling that her hand-to-hand combat moves had weakened somewhat. He feared that she wouldn't be able to defend herself if need be and vaguely wondered if that was part of the reason why she wouldn't leave the house. After all, there were a good number of people, both among civilians and the military, who didn't approve of her or Rainer and Berthold being out of prison at all. Further, there was still a population that wanted all three of them dead. Amin had gained some muscle over the years, but he still feared that he wouldn't be able to protect Annie should the need arise. But what Amin could do was understand and work with people's minds. He knew how people, especially people close to him, thought, and, while he didn't like thinking of himself as a manipulator, he did know how to get what he wanted out of people. Thank goodness he was a pure-hearted soul. "Come to the market with me," he asked, ripping a small loaf of bread in half and placing one piece on Annie's plate. When there was no response, he continued, "Okay, then at least eat everything I put in front of you." Annie's eyes widened. "Huh? If you're not gonna come, then you surrender full authority to me to decide what's for dinner, and you have to eat whatever I serve." "Since when?" "Since now." Annie narrowed her eyes at Amin's waiting smile. He was enjoying this way too much. She rolled her eyes and said, "Fine, get whatever you want." Well, that backfired. Good thing Amin always had a trick up his sleeve. That afternoon, he came home with a large basket full of ingredients. Among them was a large chicken, which made Annie do a double take. He just smiled at her and went to work in the kitchen, plucking and cleaning the poultry while humming a sweet, little tune. Annie watched him from the connecting living room while pretending to read one of his books, and the looks didn't go unnoticed. Amin didn't mind though, since his plan was already set in motion. The knock on the door came about 10 minutes before dinner was ready. Armin wiped his hands and answered it, since Annie refused. She hadn't answered the door since being freed from prison, fearing that the military police or angry civilians would be coming after her. As with everything else that had come with Annie moving in, Armin didn't mind, especially on this night. Annie froze when she saw Rainer and Berthold standing in the doorway. Rainer waved at her as they stepped inside and Armin took their jackets. "Haven't seen you in a while," he said with a cheery smile. "How why been?" Annie hesitated in her response. "Fine. I hope you don't mind," Armin said as he walked back into the kitchen and started cutting the chicken. "I ran into them at the market and invited them over for dinner. It's been forever since we've hung out together and work wasn't involved." Annie shrugged. "Yeah, I guess so." When the four of them sat down to dinner, Armin and Rainer did most of the talking. Berthold smiled and laughed along politely, feeling comfortable among his friends and lover. Annie sat silently, alternating between staring down at her food and looking up to watch the men chat. True to her deal with Armin, she ate everything on her plate. Despite how delicious everything was, she felt like a brick was sitting in the bottom of her stomach, and that wasn't because she hadn't eaten meat in a long time. "What do you think, Annie?" The blonde had been staring at her plate and suddenly looked up, startled slightly. "Huh? We were talking about how Connie's gonna be as a dad," Rainer explained, trying to hold back a laugh. "I swear, I never thought he'd have kids so soon after getting hitched. Hell, I never thought he'd get hitched at all. I'm imagining him trying to change diapers in the middle of the night, and it's the funniest thing ever." He barely got his last line out before laughing loudly. Armin forced himself to swallow a mouthful of chicken and then laughed with him. "What about Sasha? The poor kid is barely gonna be a few minutes old, and it'll be strapped to her back while she goes hunting. Kid's probably gonna know what wild game tastes like before getting a drop of milk." Even Berthold couldn't hold back his laughs at that one, knowing their jest was good-natured. That sure did sound like something Sasha would do, and he had to admit that the thought of Connie trying to calm a fussy baby was highly amusing. Annie just shrugged. "I dunno, they'll make it work somehow." "Or, we're just joking," Rainer sighed, coming down from the high of laughter. "Of course they'll be great parents. If Eren and Levi can raise a good kid, Connie and Sasha should have no problems." Annie snorted. "I think that kid is a little more than good." Armin smirked. Now they were getting somewhere. Rainer grinned. "Yeah, you're right. I dunno how Eren and Levi won the kid lottery, but I'm glad they did. That kid is so damn cute." Annie and had babysat him together once, Armin added. "Well, not entirely by choice. Eren barged in on date night and left him here, but whatever." He paused to giggle. "Anyway, he has an incredible imagination. You should have seen the pictures he was drawing. We only talked about what the outside world could be like for a few minutes, and he started thinking up all sorts of things to say. Annie and I got to go to, where was it, the multicolored rock walls. And they won't like the walls here either. They had a bunch of different rocks in all sorts of shapes, sizes, and colors. Hell, I don't know how he thought that up, but if a place like that does exist, I'd like to see it." Rainer's eyes widened slightly. "He thought of all that?" "Yeah, and he even thought up a place for you and Berthold to visit, the tall mountains that shoot fire water." "And what else was there?" "A forest where it rains all the time, land made of ice, fields of sand, and, of course, the ocean." The smaller blonde paused to take in Rainer's unreadable expression and then said, "Something wrong?" "The kid's awfully smart." The whole house was quiet for a few seconds. "Ah, sorry," Rainer sighed, "I ruined the mood." "No, you wouldn't mention it unless you thought it was important. I just wonder, he seems a little too smart for his age." Berthold bit his lip. "You think?" Armin's eyes widened. "What?" Before Rainer could reply, Annie slammed her hands down on the table, silencing the house again. The men stared at her, startled by her actions, and waited for an explanation. Annie's shoulder trembled slightly as her resolve crumbled, and she lowered her head out of shame. "I don't want to hear about it," she said, her voice muffled and low. I don't care how deep in denial I am. If anything is wrong with that boy, I don't want to know about it. To be fair, Raina said after a moment's pause, I don't think anything's wrong with him. I still don't want to hear about it. Another pause. It's selfish, but that boy means so much to me. Annie heard the main prison door open and close and looked up as she heard footsteps come towards her. They were even and calm as they approached, and they stopped in front of her cell. Sitting in the corner with her knees to her chest, she looked up just enough so that she could meet her visitor's stare. I'm surprised, she said coolly. I was sure you'd leave me here to rot. Levi frowned. Trust me, I considered it. They were silent for a few long moments. So to what do I owe the pleasure of your visit? Annie asked, hugging her knees tighter. Are you here to mock me? To watch me suffer? To know that I'm stuck here in the dark unless you say otherwise? I want to know why you helped us. Silence. An angry frown formed on Annie's face. Don't flatter yourself, she shot back. It's not like I wanted to atone for my sins or whatever, and I certainly don't see you as a friend. I helped you, but it wasn't for you. It wasn't for anyone else in the Survey Corps either. I wasn't thinking of you or Eren or Raina or Berthold or even Armin or anyone else. Levi's eyes narrowed. Then why did you help us? Annie took her time answering the question, still wrapped up in ball in the cell's back corner. Eventually, she glared at Levi and, in a strained voice, said, I did it for your son. Levi's eyes shot open. I know that there are groups out there that want your family dead, Annie continued, desperately trying to keep her voice steady. I know that there's a small faction within the military police associated with those groups. I couldn't find information on all of them, but at least you now know who to watch out for within the military police. Who knows, maybe you'll be able to trace those losers back to the religious conservatives at the heart of those groups. But no matter what it cost, I wanted to protect that boy, and the only way I could protect him was to help you. She then turned away from Levi so she was leaning against the cold cell wall. There, now you know. Levi's entire body shook, but he kept his composure. His eyes narrowed again, and he held onto a cell bar with one hand, the other resting at his side. He stared Annie dead in the eye, not allowing her any choice but to look back at him, and said, I will never forgive you for what you did. I don't expect you to. With that, Levi turned and headed for the door. When it opened and closed again, he immediately took Ern's hand, started walking away from the guard standing by the door, and said, let her go. You don't understand, okay? Whenever I go out, the world only sees the female Titan. No one sees Annie Lenhardt. Kids who weren't even alive all those years ago look at me like I don't belong, no doubt because their parents taught them to hate me. But what can I say? It's not like I can blame them, not when I killed so many people and nearly destroyed Stohess. And plenty of people within all three branches of the military hate me, too. Plenty of them think that I shouldn't have been allowed back in. Plenty of people think I should be dead. But that boy ran up to me without fear. He smiled at me and put a flower in my hair and told me that I was pretty. He didn't see a murderer or a monster or the female Titan. He only saw me. Silence. Damn it, Annie huffed out, getting up from her seat and heading back towards the bedroom. Annie. Berthold cried before either of the blondes could speak. He ran after her and grabbed her, and just as she turned a corner, she entered back and glared up at him. Move, Berthold, she ordered, eyes beginning to water. The tall man was starting to sweat, but he kept his firm gaze on her, refusing to back down. No, I won't. I won't, Annie. I refuse. You think you're all alone in the world. You think that you have nobody and that everyone is your enemy. Forget what your dad said all those years ago. You live in a better world now. Berthold. It's still not a perfect world, but I think it's a better one anyway. You're not alone anymore, Annie. You're allowed to be with us. You're allowed to rely on us. Berthold, move. I won't let you turn into me. I won't let you become some hermit who can't bear to show her face to the world. Annie's eyes widened and she looked at the man as if he had just grown a second head. What? Do you seriously think that you're the only one suffering? Berthold asked, his voice starting to shake. Lots of people want Raina and me dead, too. I think the only reason I haven't completely given up is because Raina won't let me. It's only because of him that I have any strength left at all and is my sole reason for continuing to live in this world. And yet, he was sweating profusely now, feeling his anxiety build up within him. It was sickening. And yet I hate myself so much that I can barely stand next to him in public without wanting to cry. I hate that, too, which makes me hate myself even more. I can't escape from this cycle, but I refuse to let you fall into it. Annie stared at the tall man, unsure of what to say and starting to feel rather emotional herself. The room suddenly felt hot, and the hallway walls seemed to close in on her. When she gasped for breath, the trance broke, and she ran opposite Berthold, out the front door and into the night. She vaguely heard Ermin call after her, but his voice disappeared from her hearing when she heard familiar giggling nearby. That was a good restaurant, Daddy. You like the tomato salad, huh? Yeah. Can you make that at home, Papa? I can try. Annie watched with teary eyes as the Ada family came walking down the street, no doubt on their way home from dinner. When the little boy's eyes met hers, the child squealed and waved at her. Hi, Aunt Annie. Levi glanced up at the woman, face neutral. Annie didn't dare to reply to the boy for fear of what his papa would say. But Levi just gave the child a small smile and said, "Go on, go give Aunt Annie a hug." He did just that, and Annie felt more alive in that moment than she had in years. I mean, the little blonde just smiled. Raina narrowed his eyes as Berthold made his way back to the kitchen table. You didn't meet up with us in the market. You came specifically to our house and invited us over for dinner. Armin just shrugged, still smiling. Oh yeah, I met up with Eren and Levi in the marketplace and told them about a great restaurant nearby. That's what happened, my mistake. This particular Sunday may not have been as lazy as Armin liked his Sundays to be, but he could wait another week for the next one. Chapter 30. Relationship Story. After a moment of hesitation, Mikasa knocked on the door in front of her and then waited. The house was small, just enough for one person, but it didn't seem like its owner was home. She knocked again, this time more confidently, but when she still received no answer, she sighed and turned away. She hadn't seen Jean outside of work in a month. She tried to reason with herself that she hadn't been avoiding him on purpose, but she knew it was a lie. She didn't even know what she was feeling anymore, not that she ever knew what she had been feeling that day when she had first appeared on Jane's doorstep after the failed expedition. Loneliness. Sadness. Desire. Whatever it was, it had only intensified since then, and she didn't like it. Her lunch date with her brother stuck out in her mind as she walked away from the residential part of town. I've never been to this place before, Eren commented as he sat down at an outdoor table across from his sister. Mikasa shrugged. I've actually never been here either. I just overheard someone at headquarters talk about it. Ah well, that's okay, I'm sure it's fine. The two only had to wait a few seconds before a waiter came to them and offered drinks. When Mikasa mentioned that it was Eren's birthday, the waiter grinned and said that his beer was on the house then. Eren's cheeks flushed an embarrassed pink, and he laughed as the three guys at the table next to them cheered. Mikasa smiled and then put in their orders for lunch, thanking the waiter as he left. So how has life at HQ been lately? Eren asked, taking a sip of his beer. It feels so long since I lived there. Mikasa shrugged again. The usual, I guess. I don't live there, but I sure feel like I do sometimes. It's weird not having the rest of the gang around all the time. I mean, yeah, you all still have to come a few times a week, but life within the walls has been pretty quiet lately. We haven't even been on that many expeditions in recent years. Eren's face hardened and his grip on his beer mug tightened. Yeah, I don't like that. It's not that I want to be away from my family, and it's not like I want to put everyone in danger, but I feel like we haven't done as much as we used to. I guess I understand, like what Hans said that one time when we were little. That if we are not fighting, it means we are at peace. Eren nodded. I still don't like what he said, and I still don't believe it, but I can understand why he said it and why so many people think that way. After all, some would say that we've overcome some of our biggest obstacles now that Annie, Reiner, and Berthold are on our side, but I don't know, I still don't like this. It still feels like false peace to me. Mikasa smiled slightly. You've grown up. You're still the same, but you've grown up. The pink color returned to Eren's cheeks. Hey, stop that, why are you embarrassing me so much today? Technically you're the youngest sibling. Oh, shut up. But he still grinned playfully. Mikasa grinned back momentarily, her face softening into concern. I don't like this, Commander, she murmured. Since Owen retired and this new guy came in, we've gone on fewer expeditions. I can't tell if he's scared of going outside or if he's plotting something else. Owen frowned. Yeah, I know what you mean. Owen didn't tell us a lot, but he at least wasn't afraid of going outside. He was ready to go at a moment's notice, and he always did what he thought was best for humanity. Plenty of people disagreed with him, but he wasn't wishy-washy and still isn't. I like that about him. But at least he's just retired from being the commander, right? He's still working behind the scenes. Trust me, his entire being is devoted to working behind the scenes. He's the one who really lives at HQ. When Zackley croaks, he'll be Supreme Commander, right? He should be. Eren took a long swig of his beer and sighed. Sometimes I wonder why Levi didn't become the commander, but I'm torn on the issue. On one hand, the entire Survey Corps trusts him, and I do feel like he could lead all of us, but, oh God, I'm terrible. I never want to see him hurt again. I wish I could keep him at home. He gave his sister a pathetic look. That doesn't sound like me, right? Mikasa shook her head. No, it doesn't, but I know why you're thinking that way. Loving someone changes everything. Eren looked touched at first, but then let out a small laugh. When his sister cocked her head at him, he said, Sorry, I was just thinking about Levi's response to that. He'd probably be like, What are you talking about, you stupid brat? I'm a grown-ass man who can take care of his damn self, or something like that. He narrowed his eyes and flattened his mouth into a bitter frown, causing Mikasa to burst out laughing. Eren relaxed his face and laughed along with her until she calmed down. Mikasa didn't laugh often, so, when she did, Eren felt like he had to savor the moment. He smiled at her, thrilled to watch her enjoy something, and then said, You saved his life, you know. She looked up and stopped laughing. During the last expedition, you killed the Titan before it could bite all the way through him. Thank you. The woman shyly brought her scarf up to cover the lower half of her face, and she sat back in her chair. She was quiet for a few seconds before saying, His family. He's my brother-in-law. And if he died, who'd help you raise my nephew? Her eyes glanced upwards to her brother, and she finished, I'm more grateful to you, Eren. For the first time in my entire life, my family grew. Eren smiled at her and recalled when he and Levi had announced the expecting of their son. Mikasa had been the first one to defend them, and she had been the first one to offer her support. Without a doubt, she was like Owen in that she supported those she loved from behind the scenes. At that moment, the waiter returned with their lunches, and the two settled down to eat. They were quiet at first, more interested in their food, but then Mikasa said, I've also been seeing Jean lately. Eren gagged on his food. Mikasa immediately jumped up and slapped Eren on the back a few times until he spit the offending food out and could breathe normally. The three guys at the table next to them asked if he was okay, and he waved them off. The waiter rushed to their table side, but Eren insisted that he was fine. The waiter hesitantly left, and the men eventually went back to their drinking and chattering. Mikasa sat back down in her seat, and Eren awkwardly stared at her. Come again. I've been seeing Jean lately. You mean like Dash? The woman's voice dropped low. I'm not sleeping with him, dumbass. Then what dash? I've just been spending time with him. He got hurt on the expedition, too, so I visited him one afternoon after he got out of the hospital. We just enjoy each other's company. Eren raised an eyebrow and started eating again. Are you sure about that? Eren. Look, Jean and I aren't exactly close friends, but you've barely given the guy a glance since the day we met him. Why are you suddenly spending time with him? Do you feel like you don't have anybody else? Because if you do, you shouldn't. Mikasa couldn't speak. Eren sighed heavily. I always told you that you spent too much time fussing over me, and now I understand why you did, but you never focused on yourself. Everything you've ever done has always been connected to another person, be that person me or I mean or whoever. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but I really wish you'd find a way to get satisfaction out of yourself. Silence. And I don't want Jean to get hurt more than he already is. A few tears pricked at the corners of Mikasa's eyes. Eren saw his sister's reaction and smiled gently. I don't want to upset you. You deserve a good life. You deserve to find your own happiness. That's all I want for you, but I want you to know that you are needed, Mikasa. I still need you. Levi needs you. That adorable nephew of yours needs you. I didn't abandon you after I got married, I just have my own life now. You deserve your own happy life, too, and if you find that with Jane, well, I have no right to intervene. Just make sure that you are with him because you want to be, not because you feel sorry for him or think nobody else wants you. Mikasa whimpered quietly and rubbed her eyes, clutching her scarf at her nose. She took a few deep breaths through it and then nodded, setting it back around her neck and going back to her food. You really have grown up. Eren grinned and also went back to his food. But you're a terrible liar. You and Jean are close friends. It was a good thing that Eren hadn't taken a bite, because he would have gagged on that piece, too. When Mikasa looked up, she realized she was already at the gate leading into Wall Maria's interior. A few garrison soldiers stood nearby, and the ferry leading to Wall Rose was set to leave in a few minutes. Taking a deep breath, Mikasa walked past the soldiers and boarded the ferry. After all, the Wall Rose city closest to Giganshina was Trust. Jean hoisted the sheets above his head as sunlight streamed into his room. What time was it? Did it even matter anymore? It wasn't like he had any plans, and he didn't even want to do anything anyway. He had missed days of work already, but nobody was coming after him for it. Nobody seemed to be looking for him anyway. With this depressing thought in mind, he rolled over and tried to go back to sleep. Of course, that was when the door had to open. Jean, sweetie, his mother called, are you awake? Jean groaned and threw the sheets off in. I don't want to be bothered, I already told you. His mother shook her head. You visit home for the first time in years, and all you do is mope in bed. It's a beautiful day outside. Come with me to the market or something. Stop talking to me like I'm a kid, says the so-called adult from his childhood bed. Ouch. Jean had no snappy comeback for that one, so he covered himself back up again and curled into a ball, hoping his mother would leave. He had visited a few days prior because he had missed the comforts of home, but that didn't mean he wanted to spend time with his mother. The woman just sighed and walked over to him. She gently brought the covers down and kissed her son's forehead. When you want to talk, you will. You know you're welcome home anytime. Home, how about I make you an OMON? You haven't properly eaten since you got here. Would that make you feel better? She smiled when her son nodded and kissed him again. Okay, give me a few minutes. Just as she promised, Mrs. Kirstein soon returned with her son's favorite meal. For the first time in days, Jean sat up in bed and ate properly. He was still only wearing a ratty t-shirt and underwear, and his hair and face were a mess, but his mother still smiled anyway. This was better than nothing. She kissed her son again and headed back downstairs. As soon as she reached the bottom floor, there was a knock at the front door. She opened it to reveal a young woman. Yes? Oh, my name is Mikasa Ackerman, and... "Oh, are you looking for Jane?" Mikasa nodded. "Is he here?" Mrs. Kirstein nodded. "Yes, please come in." She moved out of the way so Mikasa could step inside and then closed the door. "He's upstairs, follow me." She headed back up the stairs, Mikasa right behind her, and opened the door to her son's room. "Jean, sweetie, your little friend is here to see you." The fork in Jean's hand skidded across the plate, creating a loud, unpleasant squeaking noise. Jean stared, wide-eyed with a mouthful of omelette, at his mother, and his cheeks turned bright red when he made eye contact with Mikasa. The dark-haired woman didn't say anything, breaking the eye contact to look at the piles of dirty clothes and layers of dust scattered about the room. Jean forced himself to swallow the bite of food in his mouth and let out a panicked, embarrassed scream. "Knock before you open the damn door, you old hag." "I'm in my underwear for God's sake." "That's not my problem, Jean, sweetie, I stopped dressing years ago." "Goddammit, get out, get through you yet." He threw his pillow at the door and fearfully looked at Mikasa, who just watched the entire scene unfold with wide eyes. Mrs. Kirstein muttered something about how ungrateful her son was and turned to leave. "Geez, I make you a yummy OMOM full of love and bring your little friend up to see you, and this is how you repay me. Get the hell out." His mother rolled her eyes and shut the door behind her, leaving the two young adults alone. Jean immediately shifted his panic to Mikasa, who kept silently staring at him. Jean nearly wailed and buried himself back underneath his bed covers, shouting about how she needed to leave, too. Mikasa could hear him ramble on about how horrible he looked and how this was the worst day of his life before giggling quietly, only making Jane wish a titan had eaten him ages ago. "It's not that bad." Jean sat up and stared at Mikasa in disbelief. Her smile widened and she continued, "You should have seen Eren first thing in the morning when we were kids." Jean had to smile at the thought of Eren looking worse than he did in the morning, and he slowly sat back up in bed, cheeks still bright red and hands trembling somewhat. "Oh God, this is the worst. Her looks so damn stupid right now." "No," Mikasa continued, still smiling, "it's cute. It's nice how you can still go home whenever you want. Your mom must really love you." Jean's blush deepened and he laughed a little harder, holding his face in his hands and still in shock that this was even happening. Mikasa sat down next to his bed, and Jean crawled out and sat down next to her, the two looking and sounding more like goofy teenagers than grown adults. It almost felt like they were living the teenage years they never had. Eventually, Mikasa's face softened and her voice became remorsefully sincere. "I owe you an apology, Jane. It was really terrible of me to stop coming to see you so suddenly." Jean's face fell. "Mikasa, I've been thinking a lot lately and I've been really selfish. I'm sorry to put you through that." Jean didn't have the heart to tell her that the reason he had come home in the first place was because he had been heartbroken over her not seeing him all of a sudden. Mikasa sighed. "So I've decided to take this more seriously. I'm sorry if you feel like I used you. I swear that I didn't mean to, but I was looking for someone to confide in. That day when I first came over was the same day you and Levi had been released from the hospital, so I had been at Eren and Levi's place before coming to see you. I've spent most of my life with Eren, focusing only on him. I don't think I was wrong to do that. I supported him when he told me he was going to marry Levi, and I supported them when they had their son, but I felt like I was being left behind. Without Eren, I didn't think I had anyone, so I went to you, knowing that you knew what loss felt like." Jean frowned and hugged his knees to his chest, resting his chin on top of them. He didn't like what he was hearing, but he couldn't blame Mikasa for feeling that way. Still, something about her explanation confused him. "When you say loss," he began, "what do you mean?" So Mikasa told him. She told him everything that happened to her on that horrible day when she was just 9 years old. She spared no detail about how cold she had felt, how petrified she had been, and how sad and relieved she had felt in the aftermath of it all. She explained why Eren was so important, and after all that, she didn't need to explain why she had felt left behind when he had gone and made his own life. When she was done, Jean shut his eyes tightly and lowered his head so his forehead was resting against his knees. Mikasa watched him sympathetically, wondering if she should have held back somewhat, but at least now she felt like she was being honest. "Damn," Jean finally said, not looking up, "that makes my life look like a peaceful fantasy world filled with rainbows." Mikasa shook her head even though she knew Jean couldn't see her. "It's not a competition. Your feelings are just as valid. You know what loss feels like." He finally looked up at her and said, "Do you know what hurts the worst?" After a pause, he finished, "I never got to confess." Mikasa bit her lip. "Heh, I was going to tell him on the day we entered the military police together. I was going to tell him how much I loved and cared about him. One minute, we are making plans to work together, and I was hoping we could be together, and the next." He held up his right hand and stared at his palm. "And the next I'm holding the charred bones of Maka Bot in this very hand. Hell, I don't even know if they were his bones. And I still don't know how it happened. And now I'm wondering why he didn't save me on the expedition. He's my guardian angel, right? So why did Wimmy have to grab me to keep me from dying? Where the hell was Maka?" "Jean." Mikasa grabbed onto him, instantly snapping him out of his panic. Jean stared into her eyes, took a few deep breaths, and leaned back against his bed. "I'm sorry," he whispered. After a moment of silence, Mikasa reached out, took the man's hand, and said, "Jean, let's go out on a date. Let's try to make this work." It was early evening by the time the two arrived back in Jindanchina, thankfully with a freshly washed and fully dressed Jean, much to his mother's delight. Neither one changed clothes, content to go out in their casual wear. Mikasa directed Jean towards a slightly nicer restaurant and bar that served more than beer and hard liquor in the downtown area, explaining that it was a favorite place of Anne's. Jean was fine with that, and the two were soon seated. Jean could hardly believe that this was happening to him. His heart beat rapidly in his chest, and he was thankful for the low light so that the flush on his cheeks was less visible. Mikasa was his dream girl, someone he had been crushing on since the moment he had laid eyes on her. While he had loved Maka, he had always had a thing for Mikasa, almost like a celebrity crush. She was the new up-and-coming, humanity's strongest, after all. "This place has really good fish since it's near the river," the woman explained, catching Jean's attention. Jean looked down at his menu. "Oh, okay, I'll get the catch of the day then." At that moment, the waiter came by their table, introduced himself, and offered drinks. "Can we have some wine, please?" Mikasa asked. The waiter nodded. "Okay, sir, 2 glasses of WI. THR. Jean stopped short, the last part of the word on the tip of his tongue. He looked up at Mikasa, who looked back at him with concern. Gripping his menu, he searched his brain for something, anything, gasping when he heard a voice. "Please don't." Silence. "Sorry," Jean eventually said, "just 2. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you on my own. I didn't have enough strength to get you out of harm's way during the expedition. It was chaos. So I grabbed a hold of Wimia since she was the closest to you and used her to help you. She probably thinks that it was her body acting on its own, but it was me. Please don't ever think that I'd abandon you, Jane. I'll always watch over you and keep you safe, but I'm so happy that you're moving on with your life. You've been depressed and isolated for far too long, so please try to create your own life and your own happiness. I want this for you because I love you. Time for bed, baby, let's go." "Okay," the little boy replied as Eren walked out of the kitchen. "Can I finish my water first?" Eren nodded. "Then put your cup in the sink and come upstairs so Papa and I can tuck you in." The boy nodded back and drank the last of what was in his cup. He finished just as Eren reached the top of the stairs and then put the cup in the sink, just as instructed. The days were starting to get longer, so he was thankful that there was still some light to guide him up the stairs. But as soon as he reached the stairs, the little boy stopped and turned to look out a nearby window. For a split second, he thought he had seen someone. He thought he had seen a young man in a trainee uniform, and even though the light outside was limited, he suddenly realized that he had a clear image of the man's face in his mind: dark hair, dark eyes, somewhat darker skin, freckles, and a sweet, loving smile. "You coming up soon?" Yes, Papa. Sorry, the little boy called back, running up the stairs. That's weird, he thought as he entered his bedroom. Why did I just think of Guardian Angel Marker? Chapter 31. Word story. Our anniversary is coming up. What do you want to do? Levi paused in washing the breakfast dishes to look up at his husband. Eren was smiling hopefully, his eyes almost sparking as if he were thinking up all sorts of possibilities for the celebration. Levi shrugged. I don't know, I haven't really thought about it. It's not for another month. But that's why, if we want to do something, we need to plan it now. Eren insisted. It's not a milestone year, but we should still do something. We could have a date night somewhere, like we could go back to that really nice restaurant in Wolsina, or we could throw a party. No. Levi's voice was quick and firm, and he went back to washing. There's no way in hell you're throwing some giant party, not like you did for Christmas that one time. I was primarily thinking of your birthday, the yonder nearly whined. And okay, I know, throwing that big party while you were pregnant was a bad idea, but you're not pregnant now, so. Don't remind me. Eren froze, eyes wide and cheerful persona gone. He stared at Levi, letting the implications of what he had just said sink in, and gradually slumped over, hanging his head. I'm sorry, he said quietly, feeling guilt and shame bubble up in his chest. I'm sorry, I just... He let his words trail and then turned to leave his husband alone. Only Levi would have none of that. Eren, he said as he placed the last clean dish on the counter, come here, I'm sorry, that was my fault. He wiped his hands on his apron and took his husband's hand. I shouldn't have said that, I'm sorry. Eren looked back at Levi with a gentle smile. We'll keep trying. It'll happen eventually. Levi nodded glumly. His hope that they could have another baby someday was slowly dwindling away. They were quiet for a few more seconds, standing there hand in hand in the kitchen, until Levi said, I want to go outside. Eren's eyes widened again. Huh? Outside the walls. I want all three of us to spend the day outside. Eren was momentarily speechless, absorbing what his husband had just said to him. Sure, he replied enthusiastically, a smile breaking out on his face until another horrible thought struck him. Wait, really? After what? After the failed expedition. Levi sighed. We were far away from the walls, and the only reason the expedition failed was because those dumbass religious conservatives attacked us. They won't be around this time, and we'll stick close to the walls. We'll do a quick scouting with the garrison guards to make sure there are no Titans in the area the day before and then go out. He looked up at Eren with a hint of longing in his eyes. Come on, Eren, I know you want to go outside, too. We haven't been outside for fun since Connie proposed to Sasha. Eren nodded and brought Levi's hand to his lips, kissing it sweetly before saying, I just can't bear to see you hurt again. Levi gently took his hand away. And that thought is very much appreciated, but don't forget who you're talking to. Anyway, I have to get ready to go. My meeting with Owen is in a few hours. He took his apron off and hummed up in the hallway supply closet. His son came down just as he headed up the stairs, patting him on the head as they passed each other. A few minutes later, Levi came back downstairs in his full Survey Corps uniform. He tied his cravat into place just as his son wrapped his little arms around one of his legs. Levi looked down at the boy and said, You're gonna be good for Daddy today, right? The boy nodded. That will. Have a good meeting. Levi was about to thank him when the whole family heard what sounded like someone kicking the front door. Eren walked past his husband and son to open it, gasping when he did so. Connie, he nearly shrieked. What happened to your hands? Levi and their son came rushing to the front door to see what the commotion was. Connie stood there with his cut up, bruised, slightly blooded hands raised for the family to see and, in a desperate voice, said, Eren, can you come help me build a crib, please? You're the only person I know who's built a crib, and I'm afraid that if Sasha laughs any harder she's gonna go into early labor. The entire Jaeger family was speechless for a few seconds, taking in the scene before them, before Eren broke the silence with a horribly restrained laugh. "Oh my God, you poor man," he said, and then he turned to Levi. "Do we still have our crib?" Levi shook his head. "We chopped it into firewood after he outgrew it." "Oh, that's right, Eren turned back to Connie and gave him a sympathetic smile. "Sure, Connie, I'll help you. Just let me get my tool set." "Oh my God, thank you." Connie genuinely looked like he was about to cry out of relief. "Wait, Eren," Levi called, making Eren pause just as he pulled his toolkit from the closet. "What about?" He pat their son on the head. Eren's eyes widened. "Oh, I don't want him around all the tools and supplies. I could always drop him off at Amin's place or something. You still owe Amin from the time we went to the restaurant in Wolsina." "Oh damn, you're right." Levi sighed heavily. "It's fine, whatever, I'll just take him with me." "Huh?" The boy looked up. "I'm coming with you to your meeting, Papa." Levi nodded. "It's just with Uncle Owen. It's been a while, but you remember him, right? Tall, blonde hair. Is he the one with only one arm?" "Uh-huh. I remember him." "Good. I'll ask if you can have some drawing supplies so you're not bored while we have our meeting. It shouldn't be too long though, maybe a little less than an hour. And then we'll go to the market on our way back home." A few hours later, just as planned, Levi and his son entered Wolrose and made their way towards the Survey Corps headquarters building. It was a nicely furnished, relatively new building, but Levi was just thankful that the old, run-down castle deep in the woods had been left behind for good. While the old castle had had its own charms, Levi still flinched every time he thought about the cobwebs and layers of dirt and dust covering every inch of the place. "Papa, why is the Survey Corps building not in Wolsina?" his son asked as they entered the building. "Isn't that where the military police and the garrison are?" "The military police protects the king, so they have to be in Wolsina," Levi explained. "The garrison works under the military police, so they have to stay close to them. The Survey Corps is on its own, so we can be wherever we want. Since Wolrose is the middle wall, we can access either the other two branches and the king or the outside world pretty easily." I guess that makes sense." They waited for a few minutes until a soldier led them towards a door at the end of a hallway. The soldier knocked a few times and a deep "come in" could be heard. Levi opened the door and smiled ever so slightly as the soldier left them alone. Owen looked up from his work and smiled wide. "Well, I'll be," he said, standing up from his desk. "It's been far too long, Levi." "It has," Levi agreed, shutting the door behind him and meeting his friend at the desk. Owen looked down at the smaller visitor, still wearing that big smile. "And it's been forever since I last saw you. Look how much you've grown. Your papa was still carrying you everywhere last time I saw you." "I'm sorry to bring him unannounced," Levi said. Eren was going to take him, but one of his idiot friends stole him for the day. "Ah, so it's a papa and me kind of day instead then, huh?" "I like spending time with papa," the boy insisted, clutching Levi's hand with both of his. Owen chuckled quietly. "I like spending time with your papa, too. He's a very good friend of mine. Can I borrow him for a little while? I promise that you can have him back when we are done." The boy powdered for a moment but then smiled and nodded. Owen nodded back, reached into his desk, and pulled out some blank sheets of paper and a pen, insisting that the child draw a pretty picture while the adults talked. The boy agreed and was soon escorted out of the room, leaving the old friends alone. "Survey Corps soldiers will be watching him, so you don't need to worry," the blonde explained. "Can I get you some wine?" "It's all I have right now." "That's fine," Levi replied, sitting in a chair opposite Owen's and throwing his head back. Owen sighed heavily as he poured 2 glasses. "I've heard about everything. I know all about that failed expedition 2 months ago, and I know about the religious conservatives, especially the ones within the military police. I'm sorry you have to deal with that." He set one of the filled glasses down in front of Levi and took a sip from the other one. Levi groaned and sat back up, taking a sip from his glass. "I expected you of all people to know all the gritty details." You basically one step below Zackley, right? Damn near everything has to go through you these days. Another sip. I like that though. You're one of the few people I know who actually has all his crap together. Owen smirked at that. You're a lot nicer than I remember you being. Levi eyed him. Say that again. I mean it. You've changed a lot. You haven't changed as a person, but I don't know, the way you talk, the way you carry yourself, those things have changed. Levi narrowed his eyes in a futile attempt to look threatening. Owen pretended not to notice the light blush on his cheeks and took another sip. Just saying. Yeah, well, I can't exactly be my usual self around my son. I don't want to scar the kid for life. I don't think you'd do that, Owen replied thoughtfully. He seems to love you more than anybody. Well, I'll do whatever it takes to protect him, Levi said quickly, dodging the comment. I hate how I constantly have to look over my shoulder every time I take him outside. I knew that there were people against Eren and me marrying, more for who we are rather than our same genders, and I know that a good handful of people dislike our son and don't think he should have been born, but nobody actually started carrying out any threats until recently. And it's only worse because our enemies are people, not titans. These are the people the Survey Corps is supposed to be freeing, and here are some of those people waging a war on us. And it almost got you killed, Owen added, swirling the drink in his glass. His face then suddenly fell. I'm sorry I didn't visit you in the hospital. In the aftermath of that failed expedition, all 3 HQ buildings were in a panic. I was swamped. Levi shrugged. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Yes, it does, the blonde insisted, setting his drink down. I feel bad, Levi. I feel bad about not visiting you while you were injured. You're my friend, so I should have been there for you. But, hell, I still feel bad that I barely visited you while you were pregnant. Levi looked at Owen as if he had just grown another head. What the hell are you talking about? I didn't want anyone visiting. I was a disgusting, filthy mess for nearly 8 months, and then labor was just horrible, so, yeah, I don't care that you didn't visit. Owen sighed heavily. But I do. I'm supposed to be your friend. I'm supposed to be there for you. But that's what I have a husband for. I made him clean everything up. Owen smiled at that. Please tell me he obeyed every single little thing you asked him to do the way he used to, looking like some puppy eager to please his master. If photographs weren't so damn expensive, I'd have a portrait of his face during that time hanging on the living room wall. Owen burst out laughing, and Levi smirked as he took another sip of wine. You're the one who's really changed. Owen stopped laughing. Huh? Levi looked at him through his dark bands. When you were the commander, you always looked at the big picture. It wasn't that you didn't care about individuals, but if you thought something would help humanity in the long run, you did it, even if that meant people got killed. The only individual you ever focused your attention on was Eren, and even then, you only did so because you had humanity in mind the whole time. And now you're telling me that I'm your friend and that you should have been there for me. That doesn't sound like the Owen Smith I know. He took another sip of wine and said, just saying. There was a short silence between them until Owen spoke. You've always been important to me, Levi, both as a soldier and as a friend. I'm happy for you and the life you've created. I'm glad that you have a happy marriage and a healthy child. Really, truly, if this happiness could happen to anyone, I'm glad it happened to you. You deserve it. I already know that I'm going to hell for all the sacrifices I've made, but I can at least be good to the people I care about the most. He leaned over his desk a bit and, in a serious, quiet voice, said, I'm going to do everything in my power to stop those religious conservatives. I can't silence them or directly order them to do anything, but I can now keep a close watch on them. Levi rolled his eyes. As if some guy who can't even keep a decent beard could help us. He was quiet for a few seconds, watching as Owen sat back in his chair, and then said, Owen and I are trying to have another baby. Owen immediately perked up at this, his eyes widening with a tinge of joy. Oh, So those 9 months and labor must not have been that bad, huh? Levi's face twisted into a grimace. It was hell, he spat, but it's a hell I'm willing to endure again. Owen smiled. Calm down, I was kidding. I'm happy for you, Levi. Levi's face fell at those words. That's the thing, he said, sadness creeping into his voice. Eren and I have been trying since January and in nothing. I'm even pissed that I can drink this wine. I'm starting to fear that it may have been a one-time deal, you know. Obviously, Eren's Titan powers had something to do with it, but what if they did something else, too? Owen sighed heavily and leaned back in his chair. He brought his glass to his lips and swallowed the last bit of wine, licking his lips and releasing a satisfied huff. I'll always listen when you need to talk, Levi, but I don't know what to tell you. You're better off asking the maniac with the stupid glasses, I know. I'm sorry, I jest. Levi opened the front door to the Jaeger house and his eyes widened in horror. The place was an utter mess. From down the hall he could see stains of all different colors splattered against the walls, floor, and counter. Dirt was scattered around the hallway floor and toys littered the connecting living room's floor. None other than Eren Yeager himself was lying in the middle of the living room floor, sleeping soundly on his back while a 9-month-old baby slucked on his stomach. I was only gone for 2 hours, Levi whispered in a dark, menacing voice. How did you screw up this badly? He set his bag of training supplies down next to the front door and stood next to Eren, the younger, unaware of his husband's return. Levi wiped his brow as he took in the scene and sighed. The workout had felt so good. His body was finally returning to its usual muscular state. Another month or so of intense training would do it. Of course, the world just had to turn against him when he was feeling so good. The sound of quiet whimpers snapped Levi out of his thoughts, and he looked down to see his son stirring awake. The baby gripped at Eren's shirt and kicked his little legs out as he returned to consciousness, Levi's heart melting at the sight. Letting some of his anger go, Levi picked his son up and held him against his chest, resting the boy's head against his shoulder. Hello, baby, did you have a nice nap? He asked, gently rubbing the boy's back. The baby's cries quieted, and he looked up at his papa with wide-awake eyes. Levi let himself smile slightly at the sight of them. When they had turned green and flawlessly matched hands, a sense of relief had washed over him. Grey as wouldn't suit an adorably sweet child like his son. No, sparkling green was a better color for him. So tell me, how did Daddy manage to mess up this badly, huh? He continued, carrying the baby upstairs to the master bedroom. Seems like he tried to make you a snack, then he took you outside, then he attempted to entertain you. Why couldn't you two have just slept the whole time? Though I'm impressed that he fit that much activity into 2 hours. He closed the bedroom door behind him and lay back against the headboard on his side of the bed, the boy resting against his chest and looking up at him with those big, beautiful eyes. Ah, whatever, he sighed, I'll make him clean it all up once he's awake, and we'll see if he even gets to sleep in the bed tonight. He seems pretty comfortable on the floor there. But then Levi noticed something he hadn't seen before. While the house was a mess, the baby in his arms was clean. There wasn't a single smudge of dirt or food anywhere on the boy's face, and his long-sleeved onesie was spotless. His diaper didn't even need changing. Levi looked into his baby's eyes, and his face softened. Okay, he sighed, maybe Daddy didn't mess up so badly. Pa. Levi's eyes widened. Huh? The baby brought his hand up to Levi's face and gently tapped his little fingers against his cheek a few times. Pa. Oh my God. Papa. The boy smacked his hand against Levi's face a little bit harder as if to finalize his statement, and his face lit up with a huge smile. Levi couldn't move for a moment, his stunned eyes fixated on the joyful, little bundle giggling and squirming against his chest. With shaky hands, he held his son and sat up straight, placing kiss after kiss on the boy's head. Yes, he whispered, unable to hold back the excitement and happiness in his voice, that's right, I'm Papa. He took the boy's hand and pressed it against his nose. Papa, he said, and then he brought the boy's hand to his own nose, B.A. Oh my God, baby, where are you? Holy crap, no, 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 come to daddy, come to daddy. Stifling a laugh, Levi stood and secured the child on his hip. Come on, let's go make daddy clean the house. We'll watch him do it, he said as he headed downstairs. I'll get us some drinks and snacks. It'll be fun. I just want to hear another little voice call me Papa. Owen grinned. And I can think of no better person in all of humanity to be that baby's papa. About another half hour later, Levi and his son left the Survey Corps HQ building. He and Owen found several soldiers playing with the child, and when Levi took the boy's hand and said it was time to go home, the soldiers simultaneously said, "Or does he have to go?" started making their way back on. The carriage brought them to the gate that connected Giganshina to the inner part of Walmaria, and they headed straight for the market. Levi hoped that Eren would be home by then, or at least soon, so he figured it was time to start thinking about dinner. "Hey, baby," he said as he inspected the vegetables for sale. The boy looked up. What do you think about going outside the walls with Daddy and me next month?" The boy's eyes widened. "Really? Like that time when Uncle Connie asked Aunt Sasha to marry him?" "Sort of," Levi replied, "only it would be just the three of us. June 10th is Daddy's and my wedding anniversary, the day we got married, so we want to celebrate by going outside the walls with you. What do you think?" The boy was about to reply when someone accidentally bumped into him from behind. He jumped up and hid behind Levi, watching with fearful eyes as the person muttered a quick "sorry" and walked away. Levi immediately bent down and said, "Are you okay?" The child nodded reluctantly. "I'm sorry, I just got scared because I thought it was a bad person again, like that one time." Levi gently caressed his son's face and placed a kiss on his forehead. "It's fine, you're fine. I'm here to protect you." He stood back up and gripped his son's hand reassuringly, hoping to settle child's nerves. But the boy just looked up at him and said, "But who will protect you if we go outside?" "Daddy," Levi replied quickly, "Daddy will protect me. He'll protect both of us." "Are you sure?" "Positive." "You not scared something bad will happen?" "No. Fear shouldn't hold us back from doing what we want to do." The child squeezed Levi's hand and managed to smile. "Okay," he agreed, following as Levi led him to another vegetable stand. "I like it outside. It's better out there. I mean, inside is nice, but outside is where we're supposed to be, right?" Levi nodded. "A boat at a dock is safe, but that's not what a bird is supposed to do." He reached across the vegetables to the herbs and shoved a big bushel of them into his basket. "I'm gonna have another baby, damn it. I don't care what I have to do." He then reached into the vegetable bin and pulled a few ripe ones out for inspection. His son looked up at him. "Are you gonna do the cucumber thing with Daddy tonight?" Levi choked on his own saliva. Neither one of them saw Hanji just a few feet away. She glanced at the bushel of herbs in Levi's basket, knowing what they were for, and then left, not bothering to say hello. Chapter 32. Choice Story, Part 1. I once told Eren that the only thing we are allowed to do is believe we won't regret the choice we made. I said this, but I have regrets, far too many for me to count. They start early, long before my Survey Corps days. I try to suppress them, but they always come back to the front of my mind. I see shop owners calling customers to their stores, and I remember stealing from them to survive. I see friends spending time together, and I remember how I took Isabel and Fowland's company for granted. I see the world beyond these walls, and soldiers' deaths flash before my eyes. I try to convince myself that not everything was my fault. Abuse is never the victim's fault, right? So I shouldn't feel like I provoked that serial killer to raise me more with a striking hand than an outstretched one. Yet I do. I look at my son and I say, he's happy, I'm doing a good job. But could he be happier? Could I be doing something else or just something differently to make his life better? Would doing something differently in the past have made him happier today? He's a good boy, but am I raising him the right way so that he grows into a respectable man? No. Stop. I don't want to think about him growing up. But time isn't standing still, and my baby won't be a baby forever. I once told Eren that the only thing we are allowed to do is believe we won't regret the choice we made. I never once thought about a situation where the choice had already been made for us. This rain is so gloomy, Hanji sighed as she pulled her cape hood over her head and walked out into the empty streets of downtown Trust. The rain hadn't stopped for a good 2 days now, and the streets were starting to flood a bit, so most people had stocked up on supplies early and were now waiting up the storm at home. Hanji was wearing her uniform, so her knee-high boots offered quite a bit of protection from the rising water levels. Still, she was determined to return to HQ. She clutched a box of medical supplies at her side and started to speed walk. At one point, the wind started to pick up. Hanji pulled the hood lower on her head and wished she had worn her goggles instead of her glasses. She groaned when the rain spluttered against her glasses, causing her to squint. A moment later, she crashed into someone. The box of supplies hit the ground with a loud thump, but, thankfully, it didn't break. Hanji looked up, not caring about the rain pelting her face, and was about to say something when the other person cried out. "Wah! I'm so sorry, I wasn't looking where I was going. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." The person, a young woman, scrambled to her feet, quickly brushed off her dress and apron, and grasped Hanji's hands. "Are you all right? Oh my God, I got you all wet, no. Are you hurt? I'm not a doctor, well, not yet I guess, but I could pay. Why am I talking about myself? You? Are you?" Hanji set the woman's hands down. "I'm fine, it's okay," she insisted. "No need to get all hysterical. What about you? You fell. Are you okay?" "Yes. I'm fine." "Hey, wait." The woman's eyes widened and her hands began to shake. "Wait, I know who you are. Hanji Zoe of the Survey Corps, right? Oh my God, oh my God, I can't believe it's you. Wait, I'm not a stalker or anything. I'm not trying to be creepy. My father used to talk about you all the time, and my father wasn't a creep either. He was in the Survey Corps, and... Demon." The woman's eyes widened further. "You knew his name. He mentioned that he had a daughter once, and you look a lot like him, Miss Zeta." Hanji smiled. "It's nice to meet you, Zeta. You going somewhere?" I came into Walrose to see if the bookstores here in Trust had more of what I was looking for than the ones in Gigantina, but Oh, then come on back with me to HQ. You can take a look at our private library if you want." Zeta's face lit up bright red, and her shoulders began to tremble. "Oh my God, I could never. No, I'm not a Survey Corps soldier. I insist." Hanji grabbed her hand, picked up the box of medical supplies, and ran through the rain all the way back to the headquarters building. Poor Zeta was a panting, dizzy, wet mess by the time they arrived. She fell in the lobby, prompting several other soldiers to call the medics. "Not necessary," Hanji insisted as she picked Zeta up over her shoulder and headed towards the library. She tossed the box of supplies to Moblet and told him to bring it to her lab, the poor man whimpering something that sounded like a squad leader, no, as she left with a spring in her step. Zeta came to her senses just as Hanji opened the library door and set her down in the entranceway. As soon as she saw how massive the Survey Corps library was, a red blush bloomed across Zeta's cheeks, and she stared at Hanji as if she had just given her the greatest Christmas gift ever. Hanji grinned back at her. "Don't just stand there, take a look around. Is this really okay?" "I don't know, but nobody's here to tell me it's not." Tears started to form at the corners of Zeta's eyes. Why did you bring me here?" Hanji shrugged and led her inside. "I dunno, I just couldn't leave you out in the rain, and I feel bad for crashing into you. Did you want to borrow some clean clothes, by the way?" "Oh no, please don't trouble yourself for me," Zeta cried. Hanji shrugged again. "All right, suit yourself. So what kind of books were you looking for then?" Zeta finally regained her composure, and she smiled sheepishly. "I'm an apprentice midwife, sir. Oh wow, that's so cool. Hanji interrupted, face lighting up. So your dad fought for our freedom and you bring the next generation into the world. Talk about helping humanity. So you're probably looking for biology books and stuff on how to ease pain, right? This way. She led Zida to a back shelf. Start here. You never know what you'll find. Zida's eyes were still tearing as she pulled a few books off the shelf and started looking through them. Hanji grinned and nodded, satisfied with herself, and pulled herself a book off another shelf. For a few minutes, the two sat there in the library reading together in a peaceful silence. In the back of her mind, Hanji wondered if Moblet had managed to organize the medical supplies in the disaster zone that was her laboratory, but she didn't think too much of it. At one point, Zida looked up from one of her books and said, Miss Hanji Zoe. Just Hanji, thanks. Oh, sorry, Hanji, you work very closely with Mr. Levi Yeager, right? Hanji nodded. We've worked together for years. Same with Eren. Oh, do you want to hear about some of the experiments we've done together? You know all about Eren's Titan form and abilities, right? We've learned some amazing things over the years. She gave Zida an excited, hopeful look. Zida smiled shyly. That's all right, I don't want to invade their privacy, and my father told me a lot about Eren. No, what I wanted to ask was if you knew about their current situation. They are trying to have another baby, and I was wondering if they had asked you for help. Hanji's face immediately dropped, any and all passion and life gone from it in a split second. She stared at Zida for a few seconds and then turned away, eyes suddenly dull and lifeless. No, they haven't, she said quietly. Oh, are you aware that? Yeah, I am. Silence. Should I? Sorry, Hanji replied, giving Zida a strained smile. I got lost in thought for a second there. Keep reading as much as you want. If you'd like to borrow a few books, that's fine, too. Oh, and I'll join you on your way back to Giganchina. I'll stop by Eren and Levi's place. The tea kettle whistled just as the brew inside came to a boil. Levi took it off the fire, gently poured some of it into a teacup, and set it down on a coal spot on the stove. He was about to bring the cup to his lips when Eren walked in and said, "Made tea. Can I have some?" Levi shrugged. If you want some. It's not your typical tea there. Huh? Levi indicated the remaining hodes bound together on the kitchen counter. Eren immediately understood and grinned. You think of everything. Levi shrugged again. Might as well give it a shot. Can't hurt. He took a sip. Not bad. Eren nodded. Then I'll have some, too. Can't hurt, right? He poured himself a cup and quickly blew on it before taking a sip. The taste wasn't bad, it certainly wasn't as bold as Levi's usual black tea. It had a subtle spice to it with earthy undertones, and Eren briefly wondered what the other commonly found hodes at the market would taste like as tea. After a minute of quiet, Levi sighed and looked out the window at the end of the hallway. It's been raining for 2 days now. I don't like it. Yeah, it's horrible, Eren agreed, giving his husband a sympathetic look. It's not even the rainy season yet. But, hey, I don't mind staying inside with you. He caught the smirk on Levi's face, as if his husband was saying, did you really just say that? He grinned back and wrapped an arm around Levi's waist, the two standing close together and drinking their tea in the calm of the afternoon. Eren finished his first and set the cup down on the kitchen counter before leaning down and whispering in his husband's ear. I can cheer you up if you want. Kid's taking a nap. You look like he needs some cuddles and kisses and maybe something more. Levi's smirk turned into a smile, and he leaned against Eren, breathing in his masculine scent. Even with the downpour outside, Eren remained bright and warm and gorgeously bronze. He truly is like the sun, Levi thought, allowing the younger to plant a few kisses along his neck. His kisses were even like rays of sunshine, life-giving and energizing. Levi felt his mood begin to lighten. He didn't see the devilish smirk cross Eren's face. Maybe I'll give you an extra special treat, too, since I hate seeing you so dreary with this weather. Would you like that, Servjalin? A shudder ripped throughout Levi's body, and he let out an audible gasp. He heard Eren snicker and tried to sound menacing but failed miserably. What the hell even is that language? He gasped as Eren continued to kiss his neck. It's nothing like anything else. Eren laughed against Levi's skin. Mum called it Turkish. She only knew a few phrases since the rest of the language died out, but most of the words she knew were terms of endearment. She would say them to Dad sometimes. Heh, I'm thankful that that's what survived. He moved upwards until he met Levi's lips and kissed them a few times, feeling his husband begin to melt beneath him. Knock knock. Of course. With an exasperated groan, Levi pulled away from Eren and headed towards the front door. Eren grumbled something under his breath as he watched Levi's hips sway, and his smile didn't disappear entirely. Levi opened the front door, and his eyes widened. What the hell, Four Eyes? What are you doing? Never mind, get in here, it's pouring out there. He stepped aside so Hanji could come in and took her cape for her, hanging it up on a hook on the closet door's outer side. He then made her take off her boots and led her into the kitchen to warm up. Eren was equally surprised to see her. Hi, Hanji, he said, what brings you here? Hanji pulled a file out from the bag hanging over her shoulder. I have a few things I want to discuss with you. I've been meaning to discuss them for a while. She was about to open the file when sheets of paper hanging on the kitchen wall caught her eye. She turned towards them and said, Did your son do those drawings? Eren nodded, smiling. He's pretty good, huh? That's all of us in the places we're going to go when we finally live outside. He thought up all the places himself. Hanji took in each of the pictures and narrowed her eyes. The locations were surprisingly well thought out, and the people reflected them perfectly. She could recognize Sasha, Connie, and a small child standing amongst large trees surrounded by multiple animals. Wimia and Historia were bundled up in heavy coats, so their area must have been very cold. The angel figure in the picture with Jean and Mikasa made her squint, but she shrugged it off as another part of the boy's imagination. His wild, advanced imagination. Levi coughed. Four Eyes, why the hell are you here? Hanji turned back to the two men and swallowed hard as she opened the file. Like I said, I have some things I want to discuss with both of you. Going by word of mouth and that bundle of hodes over there, I understand that you are trying to have another child. Eren's eyes brightened. We've been meaning to discuss this with you. We were wondering if you could. He stopped short when Hanji gave him a somber look, his cheery demeanor gone in a second. Levi, Hanji said quietly, when you were pregnant, you were very ill. You were the sickest I've ever heard of a pregnant person being. The man's breathing became shallow. What's your point? Hanji pulled several papers out of the file. I kept these notes during that time. You wouldn't let me touch you or experiment on you, but you let me observe. This is what I saw. She handed him the papers, which he reluctantly took, and said, It's safe to say that En's Titan powers allowed you to get pregnant at all. You both must have had the clear goal of reproducing in mind when your son was conceived. There's still so much we don't know about how shifter powers work, but I think this is the most logical conclusion. She paused and took a short breath. I started wondering, what if you were, I guess, allergic to those powers? Levi stared at her with fear in his eyes. What the hell? Maybe that's not the best way to explain it. See, there's no doubt that your body had to change quite a bit so you could carry a child. And then you had En's DNA fused with Titan essence inside you, so crap, this isn't easy to explain. Hanji bit her lip and averted Levi's gaze. Okay, basically what I'm saying is that I think the reason you were so sick while you were pregnant was because your body was rejecting Eren's Titan essence. There were two forces at work there. On one hand, the Titan powers created a womb and protected your child. On the other, they were also trying to protect you from this foreign object. The clash of these two forces made you sick. By the end of the 8th month, your son was just about ready to be born, so your body focused on preparing for that instead, which is why you went sick. Eren swallowed hard and looked at Levi, who kept staring at Hanji with wide, fearful eyes. Goddammit, Four Eyes, the shorter man whispered. You knew about all this for years, and you decide you should just tell me about it now. You just saunter into my house and spew this crap in the middle of my kitchen. Your body is still protecting you from Eren and his Titan-infused DNA. Levi grabbed Hanji by the collar of her jacket. One more word, he hissed, voice dropping low. One more word and I swear I'll grind you into the ground. I just don't want you to waste your time. Goddammit, you stupid asses. Levi. Eren grabbed his husband's hands and tore them away from Hanji, who took a step back and fixed her collar as she cast the two of them a sympathetic look. Eren stared back at her and said, "What the hell are you saying, Hanji?" Without a word, Hanji opened her bag and took out 2 petri dishes. She then took 3 small vials filled with what looked like blood and set them all out on the kitchen counter. "Eren, this is your blood from a previous experiment," she finally explained, pouring a few drops into each dish. She closed that vial and then opened another one. "This is my blood. Watch." She opened the vial and poured a few drops of her own blood into a dish before closing it. "See, nothing. The two blend together just fine. But..." She opened the final vial and said, "This is Levi's blood, taken while he was in the hospital. If I add it to your blood..." She poured a few drops into the other dish, and the reaction was immediate. The 2 different bloods separated away from each other and wouldn't mix even when Hanji picked the dish up and swirled it around. Suddenly, in a horrible moment of realization, Eren and Levi had the answer, and it crashed into them in such a way that the armored Titan's assault on Wall Maria all those years ago looked like a friendly pillow fight. The little boy napping upstairs woke to the sound of the master bedroom door slamming shut just as thunder crashed outside. He jumped up out of bed and threw the quilt off him, rushing to the door to see what was going on. Tears pricked at the corners of his eyes when he heard an anguished scream come from inside the master bedroom. "Papa," he gasped, slowly inching closer to the door. He reached for the knob when Eren suddenly grabbed his hand. "Sorry to wake you, baby," he tried to say with a steady voice, though he was quickly losing that fight. "Let's leave Papa alone for a while, okay? I once told Eren that the only thing we are allowed to do is believe we won't regret the choice we made. I never once thought about a situation where the choice had already been made for us. I've often said that labor was the most painful thing I've ever experienced. I lied. This is worse." Chapter 33. Choice Story, Part 2. Wait a second, if we both had reproduction in mind when the kid was conceived, why won't my body let it happen again? We've both had reproduction in mind all the times we've tried. Like I said, your body is protecting you from Eren's Titan-infused DNA. Because you were so sick the first time, your body is trying to prevent pregnancy from happening again. All your body knows is that it made you sick, not that it was worth it in the end. But why? It shouldn't matter if... You probably had Levi's protection in mind at the time, too. I mean, your desire to protect Levi is always strong, so I don't know. There's still so much about shifter abilities that we don't understand. You'd be better of asking one of the other shifters. Don't just start spewing crap if you don't fully understand it, damn Four Eyes. Oh, all of a sudden you want to know every single little detail. How many times have we gone on expeditions outside the walls after having been briefed on nothing? How many times have we trusted a superior only for all the plans to fall apart and the expedition to end in disaster? How many times have you obeyed an order with little to no understanding as to why your superior wanted you to do it? In this case, the superior is Eren's shifting power, and it doesn't feel like explaining anything. Then what about me? Could I carry? Absolutely not. Levi's body is protecting him from your powers. Your powers protect your body from any harm or outside forces. Think of all the times you've been hurt or something has affected your body in some way. You don't even get sick anymore. What makes you think your body would change to carry another person when it won't even let a germ in? Then, what about the other shifters? I really don't know, and we won't know anything unless they decide to have children. I won't force them to try. I refuse to use them as lab mice. Oh, but using me as your little experimental rat was just fine. Don't give me that crap. I held up my end of the deal and didn't touch you. Hell, you made me promise never to lay a finger on your son, and I've complied. I've never even given the kid a damn hug. What about him though? Did my powers have any effect on him? If they affected Levi this much, then I want to observe a little while longer. At this rate you're never gonna even lay eyes on him. Levi, get the hell out of my house, you goddamn four eyes. I never want to see your stupid ASS face again. Levi didn't leave the master bedroom for a week. It was difficult for Eren to explain to their son why he wasn't leaving the room. The poor boy desperately wanted to see his papa and bring him some comfort, claiming that being alone only made him sadder all the times he was upset. Eren almost couldn't stand his childish innocence. That might make you feel better, baby, but not everyone deals with bad things that way, he explained one afternoon over lunch. Papa will come out when he's ready. I hope, he thought as he brought a spoonful of cold soup to his lips. With Levi locked up in the master bedroom, all the household chores had fallen to Eren. Keeping the house clean hadn't been too much of a problem. The rain had calmed down somewhat, but Eren only went out to go to the market, so he wasn't tracking mud into the house, and their son wasn't leaving his toys out since no one was really playing with him. Food had been a different issue there. Eren could certainly cook, but he wasn't nearly as skilled as Levi. Most of the meals he made tended to be bland. Worse though, Levi was barely eating. Eren had been leaving plates of food outside the master bedroom door, but most of them remained untouched, and the ones that were touched were merely picked at. The one time Eren had tried to go into the room and make Levi eat, his husband had ignored him and pulled the bedsheets up over his head, and that was when Eren knew that he couldn't help Levi yet. In fact, he wasn't even sure if that still was Levi. The Levi he knew would verbally chew him out in such a case, while this one barely made a peep. All of it broke Eren's heart. He found himself wishing that Hanji had never told them the truth, that they could just live in blissful ignorance and eventually give up their wish on their own. After lunch was finished, even though he couldn't make Levi eat, Eren was adamant about their son cleaning his plate. Eren took the dishes into the kitchen to wash. His son followed him like a little shadow, watching from the other side of the room as Eren scrubbed the bowls clean. The change in the boy's demeanor was all too obvious. Without Levi, without his papa, the child didn't see any reason to be happy or get excited or play or laugh or even talk that much. I love papa, he had said one day through tears. I don't like that papa isn't happy. If papa isn't happy, I'm not happy because I want papa to be happy. Eren had needed the rocking chair and a quiet lullaby that night. His singing voice wasn't as nice as Levi's, but it did the job well enough. Hey, Daddy. Eren turned, surprised that the boy was trying to make conversation. Yes, baby. What is it? The child looked up at him with sad eyes. Why does Aunt Hanji never hug me? Eren dropped the bowl into the sink. Thankfully, it landed in a full tub of water, so it didn't break. Eren bit his lip as he quickly broke eye contact, unsure of how to answer. It's complicated, he finally said, turning back to the sink. Before you were born, Aunt Hanji and Papa talked a lot and I'm sorry, baby, it's not my place to say. It's between Aunt Hanji and Papa. But you should know that Aunt Hanji loves you very much. The boy shrugged and leaned against the wall. Since we've been leaving Papa alone, where are you sleeping, Daddy? Eren paused in washing the dishes for a moment, but he didn't reply. When he received no response, the boy let out a quiet whimper. When Eren was done with the dishes, he went to the closet and fastened his rain cloak around his shoulders. Hey, baby, I have to go outside and do some yard work to make sure the house doesn't flood. He knelt down in front of his son when the boy met him in the front hallway and gently patted his head. Oh, how he missed running his fingers through Levi's silky, black hair, and he felt a jab to his heart when he touched their son's identical locks. Stay inside and don't bother Papa, okay? If you're good, I'll get you a yummy dessert from the bakery to eat after dinner, okay? The child nodded, but he didn't seem excited at the prospect of a sweet treat. Eren sighed and kissed the boy's forehead before heading outside. The boy lasted all of 7 minutes before he found himself standing outside the master bedroom. He tentatively reached for the knob but pulled his hand back quickly, remembering what his daddy had told him. Papa wanted to be alone. But had Papa himself said that? The boy went for the knob a second time before rushing into his own room, grabbing his stuffed Titan toy and coming back to the door. With a steadying breath, the boy opened the master bedroom door and walked inside. Papa. Levi shot up in bed, turned, and stared down at the little boy, who looked as if he were expecting a scolding at any second. Levi looked like a mess. His hair stuck to his forehead awkwardly, and the bags under his eyes were more obvious. For someone lying in bed for a week, he looked like he hadn't slept much. And the boy staring at him was truly scared, because the papa he knew had so much pride and such a love of cleanliness. Whatever had happened must have truly been horrible. "Are you okay, Papa?" he asked quietly, voice shaking slightly. "Did something bad happen? Did someone say something mean or sad to you?" He clutched the stuffed toy in his arms momentarily before holding it out towards Levi. "Do you want to hug my toy? It makes me feel better when I'm sad. You said it would protect me, right? So maybe it can protect you for a while." He placed the toy on the bed and stepped back, waiting to see how his papa would react. Levi, eyes wide and breathing shallow, slowly and gently picked the toy up and stared at it. After a moment, his gaze shifted towards his son. He felt his breath hitch when he met those big, beautiful, green eyes on the edge of tears and full of concern. And, for the first time in a week, Levi felt life flood into his entire being. "Peekaboo." A flurry of giggles erupted from the baby sitting in Levi's lap. Eren covered his eyes again, waited a few seconds, and then revealed himself. "Peekaboo." The baby downright squealed and fell backwards against Levi's chest, laughing hysterically and clapping his little hands together quickly. Eren grinned and leaned back, supporting himself on his palms. "Oh man, he loves that. I've never heard him laugh this much." He looked up at Levi, the dark-haired man pressing a hand against his mouth and futilely trying to hold back his amusement. "It's so stupid," he managed between spurts of laughter. "This is the stupidest game ever, but he loves it so much." "Why?" A genuine laugh escaped his lips, and Eren burned that sound into his mind. He'd saved that image forever, too, of his beloved husband and infant son laughing together. "So we graduate from milk to baby food today, huh?" Levi slipped an apron over his head and then tied it tightly around his waist. "Yep, he's old enough. He can properly sit in a high chair, too, so we might as well start." He loosely tied a bib around the baby's neck and opened a jar of mashed peas. A thought suddenly struck Eren. "Hey, want me to do it?" he offered. "We don't know how he's going to react to this new food. He might make a mess." Levi shook his head. "I've been feeding this kid for months without much incident. I think I can handle it." He rolled his eyes and dipped the small spoon into the jar and took out just enough so the boy could taste its contents. "Come on, baby, open up. Time to eat." After a pause, he sighed and said, "Come on, it's the food and you're the hunter. Nom, nom, nom." After another short pause, the baby finally opened his mouth. Breathing a small sigh of relief, Levi gently placed the spoon near his lips and tilted it upwards slightly so the mashed vegetables slowly dripped down. Thankfully, the baby didn't spit the offering out. Instead, he actually smiled and smacked his hands against the high chair tray. "Well, at least we know that he likes mashed peas," Eren said, smiling at the boy's reaction. Satisfied, Levi took a slightly bigger spoonful out of the jar and fed it to his son. Mealtime continued on peacefully, and, aside from the occasional spilling from the corners of the boy's mouth and a little bit of drool, it wasn't even that messy. Levi scooped up the last of the jar's contents into a hearty spoonful and fed it to his son, thankful that the first real food mealtime had been a success. So of course the baby had to sneeze and spit that last spoonful all over Levi's face. Eren burst out laughing and doubled over, hanging onto the side of the counter for support with one hand and clutching his stomach with the other. The baby laughed along with him, highly amused at the clumps of mashed peas splattered against Levi's cheeks and running down his hair. Levi just sat there in utter shock at what had just happened. The apron hadn't caught a single bit of the blast. That wasn't the last time it happened either. Having a crawling baby in the house was one thing. Despite the fact that he could move on his own, the baby wasn't very fast, so he was easy enough to keep up with. Having a baby who was tired of crawling and just wanted to walk already was another. Every time he tried to pull himself to his feet, he fell, and if he tried and failed enough, the tears would begin. Today was no different. This was the 5th time in the last few minutes the boy had tried to stand on his own, only to come crashing down again. Eren sat across from him on the floor, and his heart broke as the baby looked up at him with big, sad eyes. In moments, the tears started falling. "Oh, it's okay, sweetie, don't cry," and tried to comfort him, pulling him into his lap and kissing the top of his head. I know, you want to walk with Papa and me, but I don't think your little legs are ready yet. And you know what? Papa and I will still love you even if you never learn how to walk." He gently rubbed the baby's back, and the tears dissolved into hiccups. Levi walked into the room just as the boy was calming down. No progress yet?" he asked, only for Eren to shake his head. Levi sighed and knelt down across from them. "Give him to me." He held his arms out, and Eren passed their son on to him. "Papa." The boy whimpered as he settled in Levi's arms. "I wonder if you'll want to be a soldier," Levi mused aloud. "You're taking after Daddy in the stubbornness and determination departments, at least in regards to walking, so it's possible you might. Then you'll learn how to fly. Trust me, walking will get boring if you do." Eren frowned at that, suddenly understanding his mother's feelings against him becoming a soldier. "Well, for now, we can at least help you stand." With that, Levi straightened the baby up, holding onto him just enough so that he stayed upright but loosely enough so that his feet were flat on the floor. His heart felt warm as he heard a giggle replace his son's hiccups. But this was enough growing up for one day. "Papa, why do I have to sleep here?" "This is your new bed," Levi explained as he handed his son his favorite plush toy and tucked the sheets around them. "It's a big kid bed because you're a big kid now. You don't fit in your crib anymore." He frowned when the boy clutched the toy close and whittled away from the edge. "What's the matter?" Eren asked, kneeling down next to the bed. "Are you afraid you're gonna fall out?" The boy nodded. Levi stood and went to the closer, pulling several spare blankets and pillows out. He then returned to his son's room and laid them out on the floor next to the bed. "Here," he said, "if you do fall out, you'll have something soft to land on. Try to stay still. Don't move around too much and you should be fine." The boy looked up at him with big, still slightly nervous eyes. "Okay." Levi knelt back down next to his son and gently stroked his hair, silently reassuring him that he'd be okay. The child slowly relaxed, but he still hugged his toy impossibly closer. Levi knew that falling out of his new bed wasn't the boy's only fear. Change wasn't always easy for a child. But it was for the best. His son was growing up, and he needed to learn to accept the changes that came with it. But that didn't mean that Levi couldn't comfort his baby. He sang the boy a lullaby that night, and it was sweet and soft enough for the boy to fall asleep and stay asleep without incident throughout the night. Levi stared at his son as the memories flew through his mind. All the happiness, all the sadness, all the highs and lows throughout their list together flashed before his eyes, and he'd started to prickle across the back of his neck. He suddenly felt like he could pass out at any moment. "What the hell am I doing?" he thought. "What the hell is wrong with me? Why have I been lying here feeling sorry for myself for a week? I've seen dozens of gruesome deaths throughout my life, and this is what makes me lose it. Mourning a life that never even existed. What the hell is wrong with me? What the hell is my problem? I have a husband, a brat of a husband who sucks at cleaning and mixes up medicine jars and would probably burn the house down if I left him alone long enough, but I love him. I love him and I need him. And I have a son. I already have a child. He may be growing up fast, but he won't just wake up one morning as an adult. What the hell, I have so many more years to look forward to with him." Levi set the toy down on the bed, reached down, and pulled his son into his arms. The boy immediately hugged him back, both holding on for dear life. "Papa." "I'm so sorry, baby," Levi whispered. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, I'm sorry." He continued on like this, repeating the same line until he released a shaky sigh and said, "I've been horrible to you and Daddy. I'm the worst. Really, I'm so sorry. I'm so disgustingly filthy." They heard the front door open downstairs, followed by Eren's voice. Still holding on their son, Levi got out of bed for the first time in a week, uncaring of his haggard appearance, and headed downstairs on shaky legs. When Eren saw the two of them, he began to ask dozens of questions, but Levi silenced him by gently falling against his chest. He didn't even care that Eren was still wearing his wet rain cloak or that he hadn't taken off his muddy boots yet. The little Jaeger family just stood there in the front hallway of their home, Levi repeatedly whispering, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Outside, the rain finally stopped. Another week later, Owen received a peculiar letter among his usual messages. "Owen, this isn't easy for me to write, but Eren and I received some less than happy news about 2 weeks ago. The Dan 4 has suddenly decided to inform us that we are unable to conceive a second child. Go to her if you want answers, because I don't feel like explaining it. But that isn't the point of this letter. When I last visited you, you told me that you would work behind the scenes to help Eren and me protect our son. As thankful as I'm for this offer, I want to ask you a favor. Protecting one child is good, but we can do so much more. You said that you could order Niall to keep an eye on his branch of the military police. Put the bastard and his band of lazy asses to work for real. Get the good-for-nothing garrison in on this, too. Make them earn their bread and booze. Go down to the underground and rescue every single sick, abandoned, orphaned, or whatever child from there. Every single one of them. Leave the murderers and thieves and thugs. They'll die out eventually. No, focus on saving the children. Bring them all above ground. Make the military police and garrison find homes for them. There's an apprentice midwife named Zida located in Giganshina who can probably tell you about all the families also unable to conceive, be they infertile, elderly, single, homosexual, I don't care. If no families want a kid, place them in military custody. When they are old enough, they can join the trainees. It's better than dying underground. If Niall and his goons complain and start going on about how they serve the king, remind them that a king is nothing without his people, and no matter how physically or mentally ill, every child is a person. If the military police wants to serve the king, they'll serve the people. What good is humanity's freedom if some of humanity is stuck underground? I want this generation to be the last one that calls that hell home. Please do this for me, my friend. Levi. P.S. Tell Niall to shave or something. His beard still sucks." Owen grinned and leaned back in his chair, looking out his office window at the bright, sunny day. "Oh, Levi," he sighed, "will there ever be a day when you cease to amaze me?" Chapter 34. Eren's story. "Levi, Levi, Levi, what a disappointment you are." "No, I'm not. You can't even do the bare minimum of what's expected of you." "I do everything I can. Do you even remember anything I taught you? I've tried to suppress all my memories of you. I don't know why that idiotic brat stays with you. Shut up, I'm the only one allowed to call Eren a brat. And you're a selfish, spoiled brat nowadays, too. There's nothing wrong with demanding quality. You won't even let me. Get away from him. See my cute grandson. Stop it. Levi, Levi. Levi." Levi's eyes flooded with light as soon as they snapped open. He thought that he felt pain at the sudden bright burst, but he was too frozen in place to think too much of it. Slowly the world came into focus. He was lying on something soft, okay, that was his bed. He could recognize the sheets, mattress, and pillows. Above him was a well-put-together ceiling. Connected to that were 4 walls, right? 1, 2, 3, yep, all 4 were there. He was lying in his bed in his bedroom in his house in Giganshina, which was part of War Maria. And that was Eren looking down at him. Right, that was his beloved husband with whom he shared all this. Eren's face was tense until Levi started breathing normally, then it softened. He gently brushed Levi's cheek with his fingers and said in a calming, pleasant voice, "You sounded like you were having a nightmare." Levi's voice was slightly shaky. "I was." Eren frowned and leaned forward to kiss his husband's forehead. "It's okay," he said, "it wasn't real. You're safe, I'm safe, everyone is safe." He paused and then said, "Do you want to tell me what happened? The serial killer who raised me and turned me into the disgusting garbage I am today came back from the dead and tortured me with his words and fists and then blew our son into a million pieces with his anti-human guns." "Not really." Eren nodded and kissed Levi's forehead again. "Okay, whatever makes you feel better. I really don't think I deserve to feel better." "Thanks." Eren smiled and moved down to Levi's lips, which he kissed lovingly. Levi kissed back and the kisses were soft at first, purely affectionate. Eren then said a slightly more passionate pace, but that only lasted for a few seconds. He momentarily pulled away to catch his breath, and that was when Levi said, "We have company." Eren knew what he meant. They were both facing away from the door, but they heard it creak slightly. Eren pulled himself away and got up, and the door closed as soon as he did. He stood in front of it for just a moment, turned back to wink at Levi, and then quickly opened the door and grabbed the little devil standing just outside. His son squealed loudly and kicked his little legs wildly as Eren began his cuddly assault. The squealing quickly turned into giggles, and the boy shouted, "Papa!" "It's a Tickle Titan surprise attack." "Oh God, no," Levi declared, hoisting the bedsheets above his head. "You're on your own, Soldier Jaeger, it's the captain's day off." "No," the boy cried out, laughing hysterically as Eren carried him into the bedroom, kissing wherever he could before unceremoniously dumping him on the bed next to his papa. The boy took a moment to catch his breath, still giggling somewhat, and then pulled the sheets off Levi's head. "Attack's over, Papa, the Tickle Titan got through the walls." Levi sighed heavily. "Oh well, might as well make friends, huh? Not like he's leaving any time soon. Maybe we can train him to clean." Eren grinned. "Don't worry, this Titan comes fully trained. Be right back." And he headed downstairs. Levi rolled his eyes. "What's that ridiculous daddy of yours up to?" His question was answered about a minute later when Eren came rushing back upstairs into their room with a tray in his hands. "Tardier. Breakfast in bed." Levi sat up, eyes wide with both horror and curiosity. "Wait, what? When did you?" "Just now. I thought I'd do something nice for you since you had a nightmare." "Papa had a nightmare." "It's okay, baby, I'm fine." "Eren, are you serious?" "I am not sleeping in a pile of crumbs, Tony." Levi stopped short when he saw the sad eyes his husband and son were giving him. Crap, 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 those big, beautiful, green eyes were irresistible. Levi groaned loudly and leaned back against the bed's headboard. "Fine," he sighed, prompting gleeful looks from his family, "guess we are doing laundry today." Why is Eren so wonderful to me when I clearly don't deserve it? I'm torn on when Eren and I actually met. I saw him that one early evening in Trust when the Survey Corps had just returned to Wall Rose due to the emergency there. I saw him, but I didn't know who he was or what that Titan carcass in front of the boulder at the gate was or what the hell was even going on. It wasn't until the military police finally let us see him days later that I got a good look at him. Our gazes met and I told Owen that I would look after him despite not trusting him. That was a lie. I trusted him. From the moment I looked into his eyes, I trusted him. He had a good look on his face, one of determination and sincerity, and his eyes told me that he would never look back after making a decision. I liked that. We needed more people with that kind of resolve in the Survey Corps. But I had also never seen eyes so vibrantly green before. I hadn't known that such a green existed. I like to skip over the next part, but it still boggles my mind that Eren didn't resent me for beating the ever-loving crap out of him in that courtroom. When he told me that he understood why I had needed to do it, my heart felt light. It wasn't because I was in love with him though, as I didn't truly fall in love until much later, but I was overjoyed that I didn't have to add him to the list of people who hated me. That was also a lie. I was in love with him at the time. Whenever people asked, he says that we fell in love slowly. Maybe he did. Maybe his love started out as hero worship and eventually evolved into true love, but I fell in love the moment I looked into his eyes in that jail cell underneath the courthouse. I just didn't know it. Or maybe I did and just didn't admit it to myself, perhaps out of pride or because the situation at hand was more pressing or because I told myself I didn't deserve him. I couldn't have him anyway. Even if we both had been unimportant civilians, I still couldn't have had him. I was in my 30s at the time. I was a grown-ass man, and he was a baby in comparison. He was 15 at the time, just beginning to hit puberty. I couldn't have him, and I would never have him. I kept telling myself this, but I wanted him. I wanted him so badly it hurt. So on that horrible day when I thought he had died, all my feelings and everything I had been thinking came rushing to the front of my mind. Damn that ape. I was badly injured. Blood was rushing down my face, ugly bruises were already forming on my back and near my hips, my left ankle was twisted, and my vision was hazy at best. But I still got up. I got up and ran as fast as I could to the steaming Titan lying in that field. Did the rest of the world even exist in that moment? I'm not sure, as I only focused on how Eren wasn't crawling out of his Titan. Somewhere in the chaos of all this, Mikasa and Armin appeared, and all three of us had to cut him out. Most of him had fused with the Titan's flesh, so, when we finally got him out, both of his arms and legs were gone, and his torso and head looked as if some sort of parasite had eaten away at them. This image still haunts me today. Everything else happened so quickly. I was the first one to say, "I love you." At least I think I was. Mikasa, and I barely left his bedside in the hospital. Neither one of them questioned why I was there, and I was grateful. It's disgustingly selfish of me, but I was so happy that Eren woke up while the two of them were out. I was the first person he saw, and I barely gave him any time to think before I said those 3 words. It truly was a whirlwind romance several years in the making. Immediately after Eren turned 18, we moved into our own house in Giganshina together, and we got married on June 10th, barely 2.5 months later. Being newlyweds was incredible. It almost felt like my wish to have Eren all to myself came true, as we spent nearly every moment, both awake and asleep, together. At times it even felt like there were no walls surrounding us, or even that we had no neighbors. It was just me and the brat, who wasn't so much of a brat anymore. The fact that Eren had grown into a 6 feet 5 inches man with a strong jaw, nicely developed muscles, and somewhat grown out hair certainly was a nice perk. So when I discovered that I was pregnant with his baby about 2 years later, a million thoughts ran through my mind about how I had more of Eren to love and how I could finally give him something in return for all that he had given me. It was hell. A painful, disgusting hell. I had never been so sick in my entire life. Not even the salt water I had been forced to drink as a child had ever made me so ill. I don't know if knowing now why I was so sick makes it better or worse, but even at the time, I knew that there was a reason why I was sick. It wasn't like it was pointless. My body was changing and adapting so it could safely give birth to Eren's child, and that helped me get through those hellish months. Eren, too. He doesn't realize how much he helped me. He was there by my side at all hours, cooking multiple versions of whatever I had a chance of keeping down, cleaning up after me every time I got sick, yes, every time, carrying me and helping me when I was too weak to even take a damn bath on my own, massaging my feet, back, and shoulders when my stomach started to grow, and telling me that he loved me. That was the kicker. Every single time he did something for me, he told me that he loved me and that he would do anything for me, that I could do anything to him and he'd still love me. Labor was the worst physical pain I've ever experienced, and even when I damn near ripped Eren's hand off, he still told me that he loved me and that it was okay if I ripped his hand off because, hell, it would just grow back. I thought to myself, what did I do to deserve someone so perfect? And then I realized that I didn't and still don't deserve him. I have a theory about the relationship between the sun and the moon. When one disappears, the other one comes out, but where does the first one go? It must look out over the rest of the world, meaning that the world beyond these worlds must be massive, bigger than any territory that could ever fit inside any wall. The sun goes and spreads its warmth over another part of the world, while the moon comes out to watch over us while we sleep. But then, why does the moon shine? Why does it not shine as brightly as the sun? The sun must never truly disappear, and its light must reflect off the moon, making it only look like it shines. Eren and I are the same way. He's so big and bright and full of life, and he radiates warmth and happiness. Even his looks are sunny, with his bronze skin and jewel-tone eyes. He smiles so easily despite all the pain he's known, and I'm glad that people are awake to experience it. He's my sun. His light reflects off me, so I only look like I shine. And even if I look like I shine, it's never as brightly as he. I'm pale and stiff with harsh, narrow eyes and inky black hair. I don't radiate anything. I'm cold and barren like the moon. And just like how people are asleep whenever the moon is out, people shouldn't see me. Eren should upstage me every time, because any light that I have is a lie. It's only because of my sun that I look like I have any life at all. I try so hard to make it up to him for giving me some of his light. I cook. I clean. I gave birth to his child. But is that enough? Will it ever be enough? I can't even give him another baby to love. Eren is in his 20s. He's in the prime of his life. He should be with a young, gorgeous woman who can give him a big family. I don't know why he wastes his time with me. Me, an old man who can't give him anything and yet selfishly hangs on to him. I don't know what I'd do without him. I don't think I could live without Eren now that I know his love. He's my son. He's the only reason I look like I shine. It would be so easy for me to wallow in this misery, and for a while I did. I laid in our bed for a week thinking about everything I didn't deserve. How dare I, a thug, a thief, a murderer, a piece of trash from the underground, think that it was okay for me to have any happiness? And then my son walked into the room. And I realized that one choice had already been made for me, but there was another choice I had the power to make. I could lie there in bed feeling sorry for myself and wishing for death, or I could be the best husband and parent I could possibly be to the people I loved most. I could work on paying Eren back for all he's done for me, and I could raise our son with nothing but love into a great man. I could make that choice. I had that power. I even had the power to bring love into the lives of so many other people. But I'm still the filthiest, most selfish crap that ever existed. When the time comes, please let me die first so I never again have to live in a world without Eren. The world was so ugly before he was born, and now that I've seen how beautiful it is with him, I can't bear to think about a world without him. Don't let him die soon after me. The world needs as much of him as it can possibly get. I'll wait patiently, only hoping that we can be together in our next lives. Our son will cry. I know he will. But I can only hope that he inherited enough of Eren. I hope that he's more like Eren, spreading his own bright light as the world watches. He must be a son, and I hope that the world quietly forgets about me. There will be no moons among future Jaegers. Please allow me this one last selfish wish. Levi. Levi looked up from buttering a piece of bread and smiled softly. I'm fine, he said, just lost in thought. He popped the bread in his mouth and ripped another small piece off a roll. Want me to butter a piece for you, baby? Yes, please, the boy replied before taking a long gulp of his juice. Eren finished pouring the tea and set one cup in front of Levi. Here you go, I hope it's okay. Levi passed the bread piece to their son and took a sip of the hot tea. He looked at it thoughtfully and then took another sip. He shrugged. Not bad. Yes, I did it. Eren cheered. I made tea that didn't suck. Levi smiled wide and slightly, and he leaned back against the bed headboard, teacup in hand. He sipped at the hot liquid slowly, savoring its taste and soaking up the moment. Next to him, Eren sliced an apple into equal pieces and set on a plate to share. Their son munched on his bread. If the joy Levi felt at that moment meant washing crumbs out of the sheets, it was worth it. He glanced out the nearby window at the gorgeously sunny day outside and sighed quietly. How beautiful everything was. Papa. Levi looked at his son. What is it, baby? The boy smiled cheerfully. I like this better than when you were in here by yourself. I'm really happy. Levi smiled back at him, a tinge of sadness in his expression. I am too, baby, I am too. Chapter 35. Nightmare Story, Part 14. A little less than a year ago, I had a nightmare. It was dark and I was alone. No papa. No daddy. No nobody. No matter where or how long I ran, I couldn't find anyone, and I couldn't find any light. I had no idea where I was either. I remember crying and screaming out for my daddy and papa, but neither one answered. In fact, my voice echoed in the silence. Finally, I heard a familiar voice call out to me, "Papas." I followed his voice and soon found him waving at me. He was standing in the darkness with Daddy, and he bent down to give me a hug and tell me that everything was going to be all right. Even though I was still scared, it wasn't so bad because I was at least with them. They would keep me safe. Or so I thought. Daddy had been silent the whole time, his face hidden in the darkness. When I looked up and tried to talk to him, he grinned. And then a titan exploded from his body and roared louder than anything I've ever heard. I was too scared to scream at first, frozen in place in Papa's arms. Papa didn't have time to react. The titan, with its huge mouth and giant teeth, crashed its face into the ground and ate Papa right in front of me. That was when I did scream. I screamed and cried and tried to run away. I woke up just as the titan was about to close its mouth around me. For a few minutes, I sat in my bed and panted and held on to my plush toy. It was a little scary because the titan in my nightmare sorta looked like my toy, but my toy was a friendly titan who gave good hugs and would never try to eat me or Papa or anyone. Besides, Papa and Daddy had told me that it would always protect me, so I figured that it was safe. But I was still scared. The nightmare had felt so real, and, to make things worse, Daddy was out of the house for the night with his friends. It was just Papa and me, and Papa normally wasn't the one who cheered me up when I was sad. But I was so scared that I ran to his and Daddy's room anyway. Papa didn't yell at me for waking him. He just picked me up and hugged me and told me a happy bedtime story about a fighter and a good monster. I think I fell asleep before he finished the story, so I don't know how it ended, but it must have been happy. At least I hope it was. That nightmare was just a bad dream, right? It wasn't real, right? Levi walked back into the master bedroom after his morning shower to find Eren sitting up and stretching in bed. Dressed in his grey button-down and white pants, Levi headed to his husband's side and pressed a kiss to his cheek. "Good morning, happy anniversary," he said unusually sweetly, prompting Eren to turn towards him for a proper, more passionate kiss. When they pulled apart, Eren smiled. "Happy anniversary, what a way to wake up." His hand traveled from Levi's shoulder up to his cheek and down to the first button on his shirt. Only way it would be better is if these 9 buttons were undone. Levi rolled his eyes and gently smacked the side of Eren's head. "Shut the hell up before I make you sleep on the couch tonight." "No," Eren whined, resting his head on Levi's shoulder, "then how would I possibly get my anniversary loving tonight, Tilda?" Levi smacked the side of his head a little harder. "Get your lazy ass out of bed and pull yourself together. We have an outside world to see." That got Eren going. He jumped up, quickly made the bed, and rushed to the bathroom to clean himself up. He did so in record time and raced back into the bedroom to put his uniform on. Levi was still buckling his belts by the time Eren was all dressed. Shaking his head, Levi started tying his cravat around his neck. He watched Eren come up to him in the mirror and wrap his arms around him from behind. "I still love you, you know," Eren murmured in a gentle yet firm voice, kissing the top of Levi's head. I loved you when we moved in together. I loved you when we got married. I loved you when we found out you were pregnant. I loved you the entire time you were pregnant. I loved you when you gave birth to our son, and I still love you now, regardless of anything and everything." He kissed the top of Levi's head again and pulled the shorter man closer. The cravat suddenly felt tight around Levi's neck. He made no move to resist Eren's hold, and all his comments died in his throat. He shifted his gaze so he didn't have to look at his husband, and no, he was not tearing up, damn it. Eren offered a sweet smile and kissed Levi's head one more time. "I just wanted to remind you of that." Yeah, Levi replied, finding his voice and trying to sound as much like his usual self as possible. "Good thing. The rings say, until the stars fall, so you're stuck with me until then." Eren laughed. "Doesn't sound like much of a problem." He then pulled away so Levi could finish getting dressed. When did the Brett learn to say the right thing at the right time? He was never this good with words. Levi thought as he slipped his jacket on. "Damn, I don't deserve someone so perfect." "By the way," Eren said, interrupting Levi's thoughts, "did Owen ever get back to you about that letter?" Levi sighed heavily. "Owen is powerful, but he's still only the Deputy Supreme Commander. I thought that he'd be able to approve that request, but it has to go through his ally." "What?" Eren exclaimed, voice full of disappointment. "Yeah, this sucks," Levi agreed, turning to his husband. "The only thing we can do now is wait. I don't agree with every decision Zackle's ever made, but the nice thing is that he bases all his decisions on whether or not they'll help humanity. I wrote my thoughts in the letter, so I'm leaving the rest to Owen. I've been able to sway Zackle's decision before, but Owen holds much more political power than I do. I'm pretty sure that Zackle likes Owen more than me, too. I know that soldiers and civilians certainly do. The problem is that, for some people, humanity means the people above ground. Lots of people don't give a crap about the people underground, so it depends on what Zackle thinks. At least it doesn't have to go through the king, then we'd really be screwed." Eren nodded. "I think what she wrote is pretty convincing. Seriously, what good is humanity's freedom if an entire population is left out? Besides, like he said, you've been able to influence Zackle before. You did it and saved my life." "Eren." "All right, we won't talk about that." The younger grinned and headed into the hallway. "I'm gonna get the little one up and ready to go. Meet you downstairs for breakfast." After a hearty meal that would last throughout the day, the Jaeger family made its way towards the large gate that separated Gigantina from the outside world. Once the Survey Corps had secured Walmaria from the Titans, the garrison and other laborers had been able to come in and reconstruct the gate with a little help from Eren's Titan form. Now it looked like nothing had ever happened. The garrison soldiers guarding the gate spotted them first. "Good morning, Lance Corporal Levi Jaeger." "Soldier N. Jaeger," one of them shouted, saluting the higher-ranking officers. "I'm here, too," the littlest Jaeger announced, holding his hand up. He was dressed in his playtime soldier outfit, as he had wanted to match his parents. The garrison soldier giggled and saluted at him as well. "At ease," Eren replied, a friendly smile on his face. "Good morning, everyone. How's it look out there?" "No Titans visible from the top of the wall, sir," another soldier replied. Garrison and military police squads did a scout of the immediate area early this morning and found no threats. You probably have a good 10 kilometers, but horses are still recommended in case you run into trouble. Especially with the little soldier joining you, the first garrison soldier added. Eren nodded. "Thank you. Prepare to open the gate." The garrison soldiers saluted again and then ran off to perform their assigned task. Another garrison soldier guided Eren and Levi to where their horses were waiting. Levi mounted his first, carefully settling his son in front of him. "Hang on tightly to the reins at all times," he instructed. "I'll hang on to you, too, but you need to keep yourself safe as well. You should learn how to ride a horse anyway." Once the family was set, the garrison soldiers confirmed that they were ready to go. With the command, the gate started to rise, and inch by incredible inch, the outside world appeared. A huge grin split Eren's face, and Levi couldn't help the smile that found its way onto his, especially when he saw the look of awe on their son's face. When the gate finished rising, the Jaegers sped off, completely forgetting about the world cities behind them. No matter how many times they go out here, it's still amazing, Eren exclaimed, shifting all his weight to his feet so he could rise off the seat and go faster. Levi wasn't about to let him take the lead. "Hang on tight, baby," he called out with more enthusiasm than Eren and their son had ever heard from him as he commanded his horse to gallop. The boy in Levi's lap squealed something absolutely precious as he tried to take the whole scene in. There was just so much to say. The sky and land went on and on without a single wall in sight. Animals fed on and ran through overgrown bushes and trees. Sure, most of it looked similar to the land inside the walls, but knowing that no wall would block them from exploring made it that much more exciting. "It's all out there," the boy thought as he felt the wind rush by his face and through his hair. The forests where it rains all the time. The mountains that shoot out fire water. The land made from ice. The fields of sand. The big holes with all the pretty rocks. And the ocean. Every single one of those things is out there waiting for us. He leaned forward, opened his mouth, and shouted, "Just you wait, world. We're gonna explore all of you no matter what." Eren leaned against the trunk of a large tree while Levi and their son sat in the tree's plentiful shade. They had been in the outside world for a few hours and they couldn't see the walls anymore. However, no Titans had been spotted the entire time, so the garrison and military police reports had at least been accurate so far. Eren took a long swig of water from a canteen and smiled. "It honestly feels like we could keep going on forever. Oh God, it's so beautiful. It's more beautiful than I could ever dream." Levi gave him a small smile and they passed the canteen to their son. The boy had tired significantly since leaving the walls. The ride through the outside world had been overwhelming to the point of exhaustion. There was just so much to say. And this was farther than he had ever been. The last time he had been outside, when Connie had proposed to Sasha, the walls had still been in sight. Not seeing them now made the boy slightly nervous, but he figured that he had nothing to worry about. His daddy and papa would protect him, of course, but part of him never wanted to leave. After this rest, the ride back towards the walls would begin and the dream would be over. "Eren," Levi said, standing and walking to his husband. Their son watched as Levi gently took Eren's face in his hands and brought the man down for a kiss. The child squealed quietly. He couldn't help it, he just loved seeing his parents in love. Levi pulled away just enough so he could catch his breath and rest his forehead against Eren's. "Happy anniversary," he whispered. The two smiled and dove back in for another kiss. Thump. They pulled apart with a gasp. Thump. Thump. They looked up. Thump. 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 None. Thump 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 thump. "Oh my God, get on the horse. Get on the horse." Eren cried as he pushed Levi towards where the horses were tied up. Levi grabbed their son and forced the boy's head down to his shoulder so he couldn't see the horde of Titans charging towards them. Eren untied both their horses and they mounted them in record time. But Levi noticed that he could hear hoofbeats before his horse even moved. The sound was faint, but it was steadily increasing in volume. He looked back quickly and gasped, eyes widening in horror. "Eren," he shouted just as his husband was about to start off, "there are people leading the Titans this way." Eren looked back and saw that his husband was not joking. Several people were on horseback in front of the Titans, guiding the Titans straight towards them. Part of Eren's mind told him to confront the people, but the other, more dominant part, told him to get away as quickly as possible. He and Levi shared a momentary glance before they sped off back towards the walls, their son's head still buried in Levi's shoulder. They couldn't hear his whimpers over the sound of the galloping horses. "Who the hell are they?" Eren called. "How did they find us?" Levi made sure his son's head was still down before turning around. The Titans were getting closer and the people were starting to become more visible. He squinted at first, trying to focus on if he could make out anything particular about anybody, but then his eyes shot open. "It's the military police," he shouted back. "They must be the faction associated with the religious conservatives." Eren looked back as well, eyes widening when he saw the backs of the soldiers' cloaks flapping in the wind. Yes, those were definitely unicorn symbols. How are they out here? How did they find us? Eren switched his gaze forward and prompted his horse to go faster. Levi followed suit and thought about all the possibilities and explanations. This morning, the garrison said that their reports and military police reports confirmed that there were no Titans in the area. Did the military police give those reports to the garrison to deliver and then sneak back over the wall? They would have had plenty of time to go out much further than we did. They could have found Titans and then led them back towards Gigantina, knowing that we'd leave from there. But I thought Owen said he'd keep an eye on them for us. Eren shot back. Doesn't he have authority over Nile? A thought suddenly struck Levi. What if it's not the military police? What? They must be from the Central Military Police. Nile has no authority over them. Neither does Owen. Hell, Zachary doesn't have any power over them. Tears started forming in the corners of Eren's eyes. Are you telling me that the king assigned them to this mission? I don't know, Eren, I don't freaking know. Suddenly Levi heard something that sounded like 3D maneuver gear behind them. The military police soldiers had reached the area with the trees where he and his family had just been resting. Making sure he had a good hold on his son, he snapped the reins and the horse picked up speed. Eren copied the action. Bang! Levi's horse jerked to the side, startled by the sudden explosion. Levi turned his head around in terror, knowing exactly what kind of gun had just been fired. He would never forget that sound. You won't even let me see my cute grandson. Ein, he screamed, surprising his husband. He was noticeably starting to lose his cool, and panic was creeping into his entire being. It scared Eren, seeing Levi so out of his usual character. This is his legacy. They are his followers, not normal military police soldiers. They have his anti-human 3D maneuver gear. The gunshots continued as the soldiers made their way forward. Gear was faster than horses, so, while Eren and Levi would have been able to outrun the Titans, the soldiers were another story. Eren looked at his son protectively held in Levi's grasp. The poor boy was clutching his papa so hard his knuckles had turned white and his eyes were tightly shut. Eren saw tears escaping from those eyes, and he felt a fire burn wildly within him. "You bastards," he shouted, turning towards the soldiers. "I'll kill every single goddamn one of you." He hoped that the Titans would turn their attention towards the soldiers, but he couldn't get a clear shot on controlling them. The gunshots were getting closer and more accurate. Titans were gaining ground. The walls weren't in sight yet. Levi swallowed hard. Owen. The man turned. Levi stared at him with a fierce intensity, yet his eyes were terrified. Hanging on to the last shred of composure he had, Levi moved his arm so it was covering as much of their son as possible, and he said, "Make it quick." Eren's eyes widened, but he didn't protest. He just nodded and jumped up, using his gear to propel him towards the Titans and the human suppression squad. "Baby," Levi murmured uncomfortingly as he could, "don't open your eyes." There was a flash of light, and a loud, deep roar reverberated throughout the landscape. The boy's eyes snapped open. And then a Titan exploded from his body and roared louder than anything I've ever heard. Daddy. The word knocked the air right out of Levi's lungs. The boy stared in horror as the new Titan rushed towards the humans first. Their guns were mere mosquito bites compared to blades, and Eren didn't hesitate to grab them and smash them against the ground. They fell one by one, helpless against the Titan's giant hands. Then Eren moved on to the horde of Titans. This time, he could get a clear shot on controlling them. He grabbed onto one of them and let out another deafening roar. The rest of the Titans ganged up on the one he was holding, and he jumped away just as they began eating away at its flesh. Eren grabbed the feasting Titans, aiming for the back of their necks and ripping their heads right off. His son sat frozen in Levi's grip, watching the hellish scene play out before him. Levi gripped the back of the boy's head and tried to push it down again, but the moment he touched his son, the boy let out a high-pitched scream that left Levi's ears ringing. "Daddy hurt Papa. Daddy was the titan that bit Papa." Levi gasped and forced the boy's head down. "No, he wasn't, baby. He wasn't. Daddy would never hurt me." The protest went ignored. The boy kept screaming all the way back to the walls, even when the battle was over and Eren rejoined them as a human. Chapter 36. Nightmare Story, Part 2. Eren. Eren turned. "Walk in front so he doesn't see you if he looks up." The look on Eren's face was pure hurt. Shame bubbled up within him as his gaze lingered on Levi for a moment before he turned forward and started walking. Behind him, desperately clutched in Levi's arms, his son screamed bloody murder. Previous words of betrayal had eventually turned into a garbled mess of screams and sobs. The boy had never cried this hard, had never sounded so inhuman before. He had been a relatively quiet baby and had been good with words from the moment he could speak. But now the volume of his shrieks reminded Levi of a titan's cry. Maybe the child had inherited Eren's healthy lungs after all. Back in Giganchina, the gate closed behind them, and Eren and Levi began the walk back to their home. The garrison soldiers guarding the gate watched silently, wondering where the cheerful atmosphere of the morning had gone. It seemed like all of humanity was out and about in Giganchina that afternoon. The roads were crowded and the shops were full. Early June was a great time for fresh fruits and vegetables as well as a good supply of meat, so the market was hopping with activity. All of Eren's friends were out, too, happily going about their business. It all came to a screeching halt when Eren and Levi passed through the area. Time seemed to stand still as they walked, and the house seemed to inch further and further away. Eren kept his head down, trying to hide from all of them while Levi's face matched the one he wore after coming back from the failed expedition against the female titan. Their son still wailed in Levi's arms, pounding his little fists against Levi's shoulder. The silence broke when the murmurs started. "I saw them heading for the gate this morning. They must have taken that child outside. Oh my God, what kind of parent puts their child in danger like that? Poor kid must be traumatized. If that's not child abuse, it should be. They shouldn't be allowed to keep that kid. Those two never should have bred anyway. For all we know, the kid's a freak, too. Always knew the Survey Corps was full of crooks and murderers. Never thought it would stoop so low to use children as weapons. What if they took him outside to fight? What if they are training him to take over humanity one day? Why are you calling it him? It's an it, obviously. Don't treat it like a human." Eren stopped short and glared at the crowd, rage boiling over shame. He went to scream when Levi swiftly pushed him from behind, causing him to trip forward. "Ignore them. Just keep going." Eren turned to shout at his husband until he saw Levi's face. The color had completely drained from it. His jaw was tense and his eyes were darker than usual. They were wide open while the irises and pupils were very small, and Eren could see a slight tremble that traveled down to Levi's shoulders, where their son had buried his face and was now screaming into it. Eyes watering, Eren turned forward and started walking again. Why the hell is everyone suddenly out? He asked himself. Oh, of course, now that horse-faced bastard is feeling sympathetic. I don't need your pity, you jerk. There's Ermin and is that. Oh God, don't look like that, Annie, you look like you're about to cry. Goddammit, we don't need your tears, too. This must look really bad if Berthold's holding Rainer's hand in public. I can see the sweat from here. Screw all three of you, you're all freaks, too. Freaks and sinners. Why am I treated like a criminal when you're just... Oh my God, wipe that look off your face, Wimir. You're looking like he knew this would happen. Dan, Historia isn't even looking at us. And there's, oh yeah, Connie and Sasha's baby is due next month. They are gonna bring their own kid into this world. This cruel, merciless, unforgiving world. Eren heard a third set of footsteps, this one right next to him. I'm walking you back to your house, Mikasa said firmly, looking every bit like the steadfast soldier she was. I can guess what happened. There are military police and Survey Corps opponents in the area. I won't let any of them hurt you. Any words died in Eren's throat. The tears in his eyes freely flowed as his sister wrapped an arm around him and led him and his family back home. Screaming. The boy was still screaming. Do you need me to stay? Mikasa asked as Eren followed Levi into the house. Do you need anything? Eren shook his head. No, thank you. He saw the worried look on her face and frowned. I mean it, Mikasa, thank you so much. But... No, I understand, she said, just please try to rest, okay? Your breathing is erratic and your legs are trembling slightly. Just how long were you in Titan form? Her nephew's screaming suddenly stopped. Not long, Eren replied, but I fought a lot of Titans and had to control them while in Titan form. Mikasa nodded. That takes a lot of energy. Please try to rest. You knew. The three adults' attention immediately snapped to the child in Levi's arms. The boy was completely still for a few seconds before turning his head to stare at Mikasa. You knew, he repeated, remaining still for another second before gagging and thrashing about wildly to the point that Levi had to put him down. The moment Levi did, the boy gagged again and threw up what little food was still in his stomach on the hallway floor. The adults stood horrified and motionless as they watched the boy cough violently before heaving so hard he couldn't keep himself upright. He wobbled onto his elbows and dropped his head. After a moment of silence, he looked back up at the adults, face full of tears and saliva and vomit. You knew, he said again, focusing on Mikasa. If you knew, how many other people know? Mikasa swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. Does everyone know? The boy continued, voice high-pitched and quiet. Do all our friends know? Uncle Amin and Aunt Annie and Uncle Rainer and Uncle Berthold and Uncle Jane and Uncle Connie and Aunt Sasha and Aunt Wimia and Aunt Historia. What about Uncle Owen and Aunt Hanji? Wait, is that why Aunt Hanji won't hug me? Because she thinks I'm some Titan monster. Eren could barely form a sound to respond before his son started screaming again. Don't lie to me. Don't lie to me, I'm not stupid. Finally Eren could find it in himself to speak. We don't think. Yes, you do, that's why you lied to me. The boy stopped to cry for a few more seconds before saying, but maybe I am stupid. We played Tickle Titan together because you knew I was too stupid to figure out that you actually AI a Titan. Levi found his voice at that. Don't go spewing nonsense like that. We don't think like that at all. The boy stared straight back at him, and Levi actually flinched. Those big, beautiful, green irises that he loved so much were suddenly nothing more than little, black dots in the center of the boy's wide, pink, puffy eyes. They reminded Levi far too much of his own eyes. The dull, black hair riddled with knots and dirt and the mess on the boy's face forced Levi to remember a person he had never wanted to see in the first place and had never wanted to see again, the very person he had always wanted to forget. His son looked exactly like he had as a child. Is that why you could have me? The boy asked, snapping Levi out of his terrible memories. I've only seen mummies with babies inside their tummies, like Aunt Sasha. I've never seen a papa look like he was gonna have a baby. No one needed to say anything. The silence said it all. I'm angry, the boy said, voice wavering as fresh tears spilled from his eyes. I'm really angry. Without another word, he ran upstairs to his room, slammed the door behind him, and started screaming again. Mikasa left after that, knowing that a presence wouldn't help the situation. Eren thanked her one last time before she left, and she nodded in response. Any time, she said before closing the front door and heading home. Eren's legs finally gave out after that. Levi grabbed onto him and kept him upright the best he could, but it was uncomfortable for the 6 feet 5 inches and to lean on the 5 feet 3 inches Levi. Let's get you to bed, Levi said, helping his husband up the stairs and into the master bedroom. Across the hall, they heard a loud wail. Once Eren was set in bed, Levi rushed back downstairs to the front closet, grabbed something out of it, and came back upstairs. "Earmuffs," he said, securing them on Eren's head. Eren placed a hand over Levi's and took it from the earmuffs to his lips. He kissed it once before Levi took it away and bent down he could kiss his husband's forehead. "Try to sleep," he said as he pulled away. Eren grabbed his hand before he could go. "This is my worst nightmare," he said quietly as his eyes started to water. "I've had actual nightmares about this, about him finding out this way." The tears fell down his cheeks and disappeared into the pillow. Levi gently tucked his hand away after a moment of stillness. "Try to sleep, Eren," he repeated, and he left the room. As soon as he closed the bedroom door, Levi heard a loud crash come from the room across the hall. He winced, realizing that was probably the rocking chair falling over. It took a moment for his legs to remember how to walk, and he slowly made his way downstairs. How did Kenny's followers end up being the military police squad that scouted the area for us this morning before we went out? He asked himself, and then he gasped loudly. "At the market. We went out together after those underground thugs attacked us, and I mentioned that we were going to go outside the walls for our anniversary. Then someone bumped into us and..." A brick of guilt dropped into Levi's stomach chest as he reached the lower floor, and, looking at the mess his son had left, he suddenly felt like he was going to be sick, too. He somehow kept it all down though, and instead went to the hall closet to gather his cleaning supplies. He worked through the mess slowly, but the mess eventually disappeared, and he put his supplies back in the closet. He took the bandana off his head and then headed into the living room. He knelt before the storage cabinet next to the couch and opened it, pulling out a box. Upon opening it, he pulled out its single treasure, the accidental photograph of he and Eren kissing lovingly while their week-old son watched on in curious amazement. A few drops of clear liquid fell onto the framed photograph. Why can't all our mistakes and problems be as wonderful as this one? Silence. Where am I? What time is it? The boy lying face down in the middle of his trashed bedroom thought. It's dark, so maybe it's nighttime. Then how long have I been lying here like this? I think I'm awake. Did I ever sleep? I can't remember. Pause. Maybe the day hasn't started yet. Maybe all that was just a nightmare. Pause. But if it was, why does my throat hurt so badly? Why am I so tired? Why does my face feel all sticky? Oh yeah, I was screaming a lot earlier. And then I threw up and kept screaming. And then I came up here and... He looked up and blinked a few times to let his eyes adjust. Slowly he began to sit up until he was on his knees and took in the scene before him. The sheets were torn off his bed. The rocking chair across from it was on its side and slammed up against the wall. All the dresser drawers were open and clothes were strewn everywhere. All his toys were spread out across the floor. The curtains on his window had been yanked off. Oh wow, I really made a mess. Papa is gonna be really mad at me. But he found himself not caring. Instead, he picked himself up entirely and dragged himself to the bed, grabbing the missing sheets along the way. He crawled up to his pillow, set his head down, and was about to go to sleep when he was something smiling at him. His favorite stuffed Titan toy. In a rage-filled moment, he scrambled out of bed, grabbed the toy, and threw it against the opposite wall. "What are you smiling about?" he screamed, but his voice cracked and left him coughing for a good minute. When he finally calmed down, he glared at the toy, and fresh tears began to spill from his eyes. There's nothing to smile about. He rubbed his eyes, but the tears still came. Wow, they must have thought I was really stupid to give you to me. You were Titan Daddy the whole time, and I couldn't figure that out. He gave up trying to rub the tears away and stared at his toy, which just smiled back with its arms widespread, silently offering a hug. Unable to resist, the boy crawled over to it and hugged it, finding a slight bit of comfort in its soft, warm embrace. This will always protect you. The boy pulled away once the words echoed in his mind and stared at the toy. His tears stopped. That's what Daddy and Papa always told me about you. But how could you protect me? You just... He gasped. Eren and Levi laid in their bed, Eren hugging Levi from behind. The room was quite safe for their breathing, but the moon shone brightly through their window. Levi gently shifted when he heard Eren's voice. "I can't sleep." Levi shook his head. "Me either." Knock, knock. Eren and Levi sat straight up in bed as their door opened, revealing their little boy hanging onto his plush toy. The child glanced at them before looking down at the floor and saying, "Can I come in?" Of course, Levi said quickly, moving away from Eren so there was a free space between them. He patted and said, "Come here." His son did so, and he picked the child up and settled him in the free spot. The boy kept staring at his toy and playing with its hair, but his parents didn't mind. They waited for him to speak. "You know," he eventually said, "I was growing out my hair so that I matched my toy. I guess I'll match your Titan, too, Daddy." Eren flinched at that but didn't say anything, as he was in no position to defend himself. When his son spoke again, the boy's voice trembled. "Why didn't you tell me?" This time, Eren did speak. "Oh, baby, we don't blame you if you hate us." "I don't hate you." Eren and Levi were both certainly wide awake now. The boy turned so that he was facing them. "I never said that I hated you because I don't. I said that I was angry because I am. I'm angry and sad and confused, and I just want to know why you didn't tell me." At this, Levi patted his lap and opened his arms, inviting his son to sit with him. Without hesitation, the boy crawled to him and laid against his chest. Levi wrapped his arms around him and kissed his forehead. It felt amazing to hold his precious baby in his arms again. All three Jaegers needed the comfort. "We were going to tell you when you were older," Levi explained in the calmest, most caring voice he could muster. "We were going to sit you down when you were a teenager and tell you everything. We didn't want you to know as a child because we wanted you to have the most normal childhood possible. Daddy and I had very bad childhoods. Daddy lost his mummy and daddy, your grandma and grandpa, when he was young, just a little bit older than you. I spent my entire childhood in the underground without real parents. I was very poor and hung out with some very bad people and did very bad things to survive." He paused to place another kiss on his son's head. "So, because we didn't have good childhoods, we wanted you to have the happiest childhood possible. We wanted you to run and jump and play and smile and laugh and sing and dance and have a ton of fun without a care in the world. This world is far too cruel, and I wanted you only to see the beautiful part of it." But he left that part out. The boy contemplated this for a while, quietly relaxed in his papa's arms. He looked at his plush toy and then looked at Eren. "Daddy," he eventually said, "are there other people like you?" Eren swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes." "Do I know them?" "Yes." "Oh." Silence. "I'm sorry, baby, I won't tell you who they are. If they want to tell you, they can, but I won't invade their privacy." The boy shrugged. "It's okay. As long as none of them are bad." Eren shook his head. "No, they're not. Not anymore at least." But he, too, left that part out. The boy then held up his toy. "This is you, isn't it?" Eren nodded. "We never expected you to like that toy so much. Hell, we didn't even make it. It was a gift before you were born. But when we gave it to you, you refused to let it go, so we thought we'd use it to teach you that my Titan wasn't bad. That's why we told you that. It would always protect me, I know." "Now I get it," the boy finished, leaning back down against Levi's chest. "Daddy uses this power to protect the people he loves and help win humanity's freedom," Levi explained, shifting so that he was right next to Eren again. "He's done so much to help us. We have dozens of stories about the great things he's done with his powers. We'll tell them all to you someday. And there are other really great things about his power, too. Daddy gives really great hugs, right? That's because his powers made him big and warm. He doesn't get sick, so he can always take care of us, and he can recover from nearly any injury. But the best part about this power," Eren interrupted, gently brushing the hair away from his son's face, "is that it let us of you. After a beat of silence, a tiny smile appeared on the boy's face, and it was infectious. Eren smiled back at him, and Levi, seeing Eren's smile, managed one of his own. The mood lightening, Eren wrapped his big, warm arms around his husband and his son, and he could have cried with joy. It would take a while to win back their son's trust entirely, but the Jaeger household was at least starting to feel normal. Daddy. I'm hungry. Oh, I'll make something real quick, Levi said, breaking away and going to get out of bed. He was about to go to his closet to find a bathrobe when he heard a knock on the front door. Cocking an eyebrow, he headed downstairs, opened the front door, shut it after a few minutes, and then re-emerged upstairs, shaking his head and saying, Eren, I swear to Sina, that sister of yours is something else. He took the top off the pot in his hands and said, she stayed up late making soup for us in case we couldn't eat dinner. Eren's eyes popped out in shock. What, really? Mikasa did. Levi nodded and shrugged. Goddamn perfect timing, too. Midnight snack, anyone? Thank you, Aunt Mikasa, the little boy said, tears starting to reappear in his voice. Levi didn't bother commenting on the mess soup would probably make of the master bed. He just set the pot down on a nightstand, got 3 bowls and spoons from the kitchen, and served the late dinner right there. With full stomachs and a bit of peace back in the house, all 3 Jaegers finally slept, the little toy in the child's arms keeping them all safe even as they slept in especially late that next morning. Chapter 37. Police Story. The soldiers, Eren Jaeger, Levi Jaeger, and their son. The weapons, cleaning supplies from the whole closet. The battlefield, the son's run. The battle, the mess in it. Eren, Levi, and their son stood in the child's room decked out in their cleaning clothes, complete with bandanas keeping their bangs out of their eyes and kerchiefs tied around their faces to keep the dust out of their mouths and noses. Levi held 2 dusters, one in each hand, while Eren carried a bucket of water in one hand and a mop in the other. Their son held onto a dusting cloth. Levi stared at the war zone that was his son's room while Eren and said son stared at him, waiting for something, anything, with bated breath. Finally, Levi let out a long, heavy sigh. Honestly, I'm impressed. He looked down at his son. Remind me never to make you angry. You your daddy's son, all right? The boy flashed slightly. All right, might as well get to work, Levi continued, rolling his sleeves up. First we should pick everything up off the floor. Then we'll put the bed and window back together. Then we might as well dust and mop the whole place up anyway. He set the dusters down for the time being, and Eren set the bucket and mop next to them. Levi then bent down to pick up a nearby shirt when he noticed his son picking toys up. No, not you, baby, he said, catching the boy's attention. You don't have to do anything. Daddy and I made this mess, so we'll clean it up. The boy fiddled with the rag doll in his hands. But I made this mess. And it was our fault, Levi insisted. The boy shook his head. I want to help. I said something really mean and I'm sorry, Daddy, I'm really sorry. His eyes began to tear up and his bottom lip quivered. Eren looked straight at him and got down on his knees so he was at his son's eye level. What is it, baby? You didn't say anything. I said that you were the titan that bit Papa. Now the tears were flowing down the boy's face, and Eren felt his heart clench. He marveled at how carefully and maturely his son always picked his words, never saying something he didn't mean. Before rushing up to his room the previous day, he had said, I'm angry, because he had been. He hadn't said, I hate you, because hadn't and still didn't. And that wasn't the only example. Eren recalled so many of the times he had screamed out in a rage and said things he hadn't meant throughout his youth, and, hell, he still did that sometimes. And here was his son feeling miserable because of one thing said in a moment of sheer terror and confusion. Eren pulled the boy into a hug. It's all right, I know you didn't mean it. No, it's not all right. Yes, it is, Eren insisted, pulling back so that he could make direct eye contact with his son. You didn't mean it. You said that when you were angry and sad and scared, anybody else would have done the same thing in that situation. And saying something like that once doesn't make you a bad person. I'm not angry. Neither is Papa. We still love you very much. We will still love you no matter what you do or say. The boy nodded and hugged his daddy again. Eren humped back and then pulled away, wiping his thumbs against his son's cheeks. All right now, no more tears. We'll do something fun together once we are all done here. And if you want to help, you can. You can put all your toys back in their box. Do you still want your plush Titan on your bed? He smiled when his son nodded. All right, then we'll leave that one out for now. Papa and I will fold your clothes and put your bed back together. Right, Levi? No response. Levi. Eren turned towards his husband, who was turned away from him, seemingly staring at the wall in front of him. Levi. Eren said a little louder, and his husband finally turned towards him. I heard you. Sorry, I was just thinking. He momentarily glanced away. Anyway, if you want to help, baby, you can. And Dad is right, he's right about everything. Finally the child smiled and rubbed his tears away. Okay. Eren navigated his way through the marketplace, heading towards the vegetable stands. He stopped in front of a vendor selling tomatoes and went to pick one up when his hand bumped into someone else's. Oops, sorry, he said, looking up, only for his eyes to widen and a smile to appear on his face. Hi. I'm sorry. Berthold said quickly, taking a step back before realizing who was next to him. Oh, Eren, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Go ahead. Thanks, Eren said back, picking up the tomato and inspecting it. Reina here, too. I heard my name, the blonde man said, coming up behind Berthold. Hey, Eren, what's up? Haven't seen you since, yeah. Eren shrugged as his smile disappeared. Yeah, we've been lying low since then, but it's been a week, and we can't stay inside forever. Wikasa's been taking time away from HQ and coming over to help us cook, so we are making dinner for her tonight. It's the least we can do, and I just needed to get out of the house. Levi's at home watching the kid. We don't want to take him out just yet in case it's not safe. Reina frowned at this. You don't need to worry about that, Eren, nothing's happened. A small riot almost started as soon as you guys were out of the downtown area, but we helped the military police and garrison break it up before it got ugly. Eren did a double take. What? The military police? They're the ones we've been avoiding this past week. Now it was Reina's turn to be surprised. What? Weren't you guys ambushed by Titans outside the walls? Eren went to speak before biting his lip and saying, let's go to a less crowded area. I'll explain everything there. Fulfilling his promise, Eren quickly paid for the tomatoes, waited for Reina and Berthold to gather their groceries, and then led his friends to a quiet area. There, he sat on a nearby bench and told them the whole story, not leaving out a single detail about who the religious conservatives were and what they had done. Reina and Berthold listened silently, taking in every word, their eyes growing larger with every new revelation. When he was done, Eren sighed, slumped against the bench, and looked up at the sky. His eyes glanced over when Reina cleared his throat. Well, okay, the blonde said, makes sense you'd want to avoid the military police then. Yeah, I don't think we can be blamed for thinking that way, but she said that the military police also stopped that riot, Eren said back. What's up with that? Well, the MPs who stopped the riot obviously weren't associated with the same group that attacked you, the blonde replied, because Annie stopped it. Did you see them? Captain Levi and the Titan guy. That little boy with them was sobbing and screaming his lungs out. Don't you know? That's their son. Their son. Ha. It's a monster they bred to take over humanity. Just you watch, it'll appear over the walls as a Titan, just like the Colossal did all those years ago. Shame on you, blaming the child. It's the Survey Corps we really need to go after. I never did trust that Shorty and his freak Titan pet. That did it. Annie pushed Ermin out of the way and sped home, ignoring his protests for her to stop. She slammed the front door to their shared house open and ran to their bedroom to put on her uniform and gather her supplies. Once she was dressed, rifle in hand, Annie ran back to the downtown area, but the townspeople were already starting to form a group. One by one, they gathered together. What had started out as murmurs quickly evolved into shouts and rallying cries. A man called for everyone to protest in front of the Ada house. "If nothing else, we should rescue that child from his abusive parents," he declared. Most of the crowd agreed with him. Others had more extreme ideas. "Put them all to death before they can attack us," someone shouted. Annie didn't hesitate to use her gear. She flew through the air and touched down in front of the mob, holding up a rifle. "Freeze," she shouted, aiming at the mob leader. "This is a direct military police order, stand down." The crowd just shouted back at her, and she winced but didn't move. "You defend those Titan-loving psychos. You should be defending us, not them. And why should we listen to you, female Titan? For all we know, you're on their side, trying to kill us all." "They are innocent," Annie insisted, finger hovering over the trigger. "And even if they weren't, let the military police handle it. For your own safety, civilians should not get involved." She flinched when the rallying cries only intensified, realizing that she really had no place trying to get the public to trust her. The mob was about to move forward again when a voice joined Annie's. "Eren and Levi Jaeger are not your enemies," Armin shouted, holding his arms out to shield Annie with his body. "Soldier Annie Lenhardt speaks the truth. Both Captain Levi Jaeger and Soldier Eren Jaeger are loyal to humanity, and both of them have made great strides in winning humanity's freedom. Don't forget who sealed the hole in Trust in 850 and then who killed the Titans there. Don't forget where all of you are standing right now, Giganshina. Giganshina of Walmaria, which Eren Jaeger, Levi Jaeger, and the rest of the Survey Corps fought so hard to win back. It's only because of them that we can live here again. That's not the work of murderers. That's not the work of Titan sympathizers. Only people fully devoted to humanity would put their lives on the line like that." "So you say they are not Titan sympathizers," someone from the crowd called out. "Then why is the female Titan herself standing behind you in military police uniform? Annie Lenhardt is a human, just like Eren Jaeger." Armin heard Annie shift behind him, but she kept the rifle steady. Armin's words seemed to hit a chord with the crowd. The rallying cries died into murmurs about how he had a point. A few people broke away and left the area, prompting a small sigh of relief from Armin, but a decent-sized crowd still stood. Some of the people in front were about to move forward when gear could be heard, and the garrison soldiers who had been guarding the wall joined Annie and Armin. "If you won't listen to these military police and Survey Corps soldiers, then listen to us," one of them ordered. "For order and peace, we of the garrison command all of you to stand down. No riots will be tolerated." And then, one by one, the rest of the soldiers joined the barricade. Despite having no gear or weapons on them, Jean, Rainer, Berthold, Connie, Wimir, and Astoria stood with Armin and Annie. Sasha watched from the inside of a nearby restaurant as the mob slowly broke up. She wrapped her arms protectively around her 8-month pregnant belly and smiled when the garrison soldiers started guiding the civilians back to their usual business. The mob eventually broke up just as more military police soldiers arrived. Any remaining rowdy protesters were arrested for threats against soldiers. Sasha threw her arms around Connie when he rushed into the restaurant for her. Annie let out a heavy sigh and finally lowered her rifle. Armin relaxed as well, wrapping an arm around her and bringing her into a hug. "Thank you," he said quietly, "just thank you. Annie Lenhardt." Armin and Annie looked up to see a higher-ranking military police soldier looking down at them with sympathetic eyes. He paused for a long moment before saying, "You used 3D maneuver gear without proper authorization. I must ask you to come to Military Police HQ, where you will be dealt with accordingly." Annie didn't do it just for kicks and giggles. Armin insisted, keeping his arms around his girlfriend. "I'm sorry, it's standard procedure, even if done with good intentions." The man rolled his eyes. "Trust me, I think it's ridiculous, too, but I have a feeling that the captain will agree." Armin's face dropped in disbelief. "This issue has to go to the military police captain," he asked. "Why would such a high-ranked officer?" It's okay, I mean, Annie said, pulling herself away. He's bringing me to the captain specifically so I won't be punished. What? I don't understand. I mean, are you wondering why these high-ranking soldiers are actually doing their jobs? This never would have happened a few years ago. The military police has changed, largely thanks to the captain. Annie actually smiled and took Armin's hands in hers, squeezing them reassuringly. Let's go, the superior before her said, motioning for her to follow. Let's get you to Captain Marlowe Sanders so we can be done with this. Now it was Eren's turn to be shocked. He leaned over and held his head in his hands, unbelieving of Rainer's story. Levi and I just assumed that nothing happened. It was quiet, so we just assumed that people ignored us, but there were riots and oh my god. He stared at the ground and felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. Rainer gently placed his hand on Eren's back. Yeah, Dan, Eren, I swear, Annie loves that kid of yours. She'd do anything for him. And Armin, oh man, you should have seen Armin. You should have heard his speech. Heh, I already knew that Armin had some serious fight in him, Eren said as he finally looked up. He saved my ass from the garrison once, back at Trast before Commander Pixis showed up. And then he snapped me out of my days or whatever that was so I could plug the hole. And then, whatever, you get my point. The fact that Armin talked them down doesn't surprise me at all. I wonder, why did Annie of all people? It's because... Both Eren and Rainer looked up when they heard Berthold begin to speak. He paused momentarily to gather his thoughts and then said, this probably isn't my place to say, but she loves your son because he doesn't know about her titan. He doesn't judge her. A thought suddenly struck Berthold's mind and bead of sweat rolled down his temple. Wait, Eren, you didn't say anything, did you? About us and Annie and Wymir? No. Eren insisted. No, that's all up to you guys, whether or not you tell him. I just told him that there were others like me, not who they specifically were. Both Rainer and Berthold let out long sighs of relief. Thank goodness. Eren smiled at them, finally feeling like he had done something right for the first time all week. He stood, picked up the bag of groceries, and said, well, thank you for telling me about Annie and what she did. I'll have to thank her and Armin next time I see them. I should go and tell Levi about them, too. Rainer nodded. We'll let you go then. We should get going, too. We'll see you around sometime, okay? Eren nodded back and headed home. See you. Berthold was unusually quiet for the rest of the day. It wasn't strange for him to be quiet in public, but he usually lowered his guard when he was home with Rainer. The blonde noticed this, and while he didn't want to make his lover uncomfortable, also didn't want Berthold to keep his emotions bottled up inside. It wasn't good for his anxiety. You okay, Berthold? He asked as they stood at the counter chopping the tomatoes for dinner. Berthold nodded. I'm just thinking. Rainer left it at that for the time being, but his curiosity ate away at him all throughout dinner. True to his supportive nature though, he didn't bring it up again. Berthold usually opened up to him over time anyway. It wasn't until they were both settled in bed that night, Rainer hugging Berthold from behind, when the brunette finally spoke. Hey, Rainer. Are you gonna tell him about us? Rainer was quiet for a few seconds before shrugging and saying, not right now. Maybe in a few years when all of this has blown over. You? Same. Rainer hummed in agreement and placed a kiss on the back of Berthold's neck. They were silent after that for several minutes, and Rainer wondered if Berthold had fallen asleep. He relaxed against his partner's warm brown skin and started to let sleep take in. Despite being a Titan shifter, Rainer's body temperature wasn't especially high, probably due to his Titan's armored body keeping everything in. Berthold, on the other hand, was like a blazing fire at times, which explained his near-constant sweat. He was especially good to cuddle with on cold winter nights. Rainer. Rainer let out a sleep yawn and mumbled something, only half conscious. Let's get married. Now Rainer was awake. The blonde sat up in bed and stared down at his partner, his boyfriend, his lover, his fiancé. Bertel, are you serious? He asked in a loud, disbelieving voice. Berthold Fubar, are you serious right now? Is this real? You not sleep talking, are you? Oh my God, oh my God. The room suddenly felt very hot and suffocating to Berthold, so he stayed as still as he possibly could even as his cheeks flushed and sweat started to form on his skin. I'm completely serious, he said as steadily as he could, though he still tripped on a few syllables and his voice cracked at the end. I love you, Raina, and I want to marry you. I want to be married to you. I want us. Berthold, Raina said, voice firm, whatever you do, don't feel like you have to do this. Don't feel like you need to do this just to make me happy. If you really don't want to, we don't have to. I want to. Berthold shouted, sitting up in bed and looking at Raina with teary eyes. I want to. I really want to. I thought about everything you told Ern earlier today, about how Amin ran to defend Annie and about how Connie made sure Sasha was safe before jumping in and then about how Ern wanted to go home to tell Levi about your story and it just made me realize that I want to be married to you. I don't want to be married to anyone else, just you. Amin and Annie aren't married yet, but they act like a married couple. They support and protect each other and Amin takes care of her the way you take care of me and... Oh God, Raina, I don't know, I just don't care about the rest of the world anymore. Annie doesn't care about others as long as the people she loves are okay, and I'm sick of letting the world dictate who I am and who I should be and what happiness I deserve. I don't know if I deserve your love. All I know is that I want to be with you forever, and I'll scream it from the top of Wall Maria if I have to. I'll scream it so that all of humanity can hear it, and I don't care if me looking out over Wall Maria is in poor taste. I'll scream, I love Raina Biu. Raina cut him off with a kiss. When he pulled away, Raina had tears in his eyes. Oh God, Bertel, I'm the one who doesn't deserve you. Raina. Berthold threw his arms around the blonde, and the two fell back onto the bed, lips connecting over and over again until Raina spoke. What kind of wedding, when? As soon as possible, Berthold gasped out. Just the two of us and the officiant, nobody else. Raina nodded. Whatever you want. Oh God, I love you, Bertel, I love you so much. A few happy tears fell from Berthold's eyes. I love you, too, I love you, Raina Braun. Annie stopped short and looked towards the house she was standing by. In front of her, Amin stopped when he noticed she wasn't with him and turned around. Annie. She looked back at her boyfriend and smiled slightly. Sorry, just thought I heard something. She caught up with him and placed her hand in his, thankful that she was there with him. True to his word, her superior had taken her straight to Captain Marlowe Sanders himself, who had let her go with a warning, much to the amusement of the nearby squad leader Hitch. To celebrate, Amin had taken her out for dinner and drinks that night, and they were now on their way home. Annie glanced back at the house one last time, recognizing it and her closest friends, and let out a quiet sigh. Hopefully, one of these days, she would be able to tell Amin how much she loved him and wanted to marry him, too. Chapter 38. Science Story. The Jaeger household was understandably quiet in the weeks following Eren and Levi's anniversary. Eren, Levi, and their son Belly left the house for the first week following it, so Mikasa took time off from the military to bring the meals. None of the higher-ups questioned her, as everyone in the Survey Corps understood her desire to help her brother and his family. Eren was so thankful for her assistance, and his son loved spending time with his aunt. She was a welcome distraction from what could have been a very tense house, especially because he didn't get to see her often. Mikasa was reluctant to go back to work once the first week was over, but En insisted that he and his family were okay. Though life wasn't entirely back to normal, Mikasa knew she had to go. Her nephew was still a bit quieter than usual, and he wasn't as cheerful as he had been before the trip outside the walls, but there was nothing anyone could do for him. Levi felt this more than anyone, fearing that maybe his son would never be that carefree child again. Perhaps this was their new normal. But after another week of the usual routine coming back in order, the old life started to settle back in. Eren and Levi woke up early to train. Eren woke their son up and got him ready for the day while Levi cooked breakfast. Levi did paperwork while Eren played with their son. All three ate lunch together. All three went out to exercise and play. When they came back, the boy went back to his room for a nap. Levi had his afternoon tea and then started cooking dinner. Their son woke up and played with Eren a bit more. All three ate dinner together and then cleaned up the table and dishes. Levi gave his son a bath and Eren settled him into bed. Eren and Levi spent some quiet time together and then also went to bed. Normal life eventually came back. The littlest Yader's smile came back, and everything in life was perfect for Eren and Levi as long as their son was smiling. Levi was the one who seemed somewhat distracted. Eren had first noticed his change in demeanor when they had cleaned up their son's room after his temper tantrum, how Levi had seemed lost in thought. He stayed that way throughout the following weeks, up until the very end of the month. At one point, Eren caught him writing something, though Levi seemed reluctant to put the words on the paper, as if he hadn't wanted to write it but needed to. Eren tried not to think too much of it, though his concern slowly shifted from his son's well-being to his husband's state of mind. One surprisingly mild afternoon in late June, Eren came back from a run around the neighborhood to find Levi drinking tea at the dining table. He gave his husband a kiss on the temple, which got him an exasperated look. "Really? You couldn't have wiped your sweaty face first?" Levi asked, wiping his napkin on his forehead before giving it to Eren. Eren gave him a small grin in return and then complied with the request. "Sorry, sometimes I just get this overwhelming urge to kiss you." Levi rolled his eyes, but Eren's grin widened when he noticed the tiny smirk on Levi's face. How wonderful it was to receive a familiar reaction from his beloved husband. Knock knock. Eren poked up at the sound coming from the front door. He quickly wiped the back of his neck and then set the napkin down to answer it. He was not expecting the person on the other side. "Hi, Eren." "Hi, Hanji." It was true. Hanji stood on the front step of the Jaeger household dressed in civilian clothes and carrying a duffel bag. Her smile was wide and excited as she peeked past him and spotted Levi. "Hey there." Levi finished the last of his tea and joined Eren to greet her. "Hey, come on in, feel free to set your stuff in the living room." "Thanks." Eren stepped out of the way so Hanji could slip her shoes off and head to the living room. Levi casually closed the door as if everything were normal and was about to head back to the dining room until he heard little footsteps on the stairs. He looked up and said, "Hey, baby, have a nice nap." When the boy nodded, he continued, "You have a visitor." The boy looked towards the living room and his eyes widened. "Aunt Hanji." "Hey, sweetheart." Hanji nearly squealed, pulling a blanket out of her bag. "Ready to have some fun? You and I are gonna have a slumber party tonight." Levi nodded and went to wash his teacup. Eren watched the whole scene, the only words out of his mouth being, "What the hell?" Hanji spent most of the afternoon catching up with Levi on paperwork, and they met back up with Eren and his son for dinner. Levi never explained a thing, and poor Eren was beyond confused when Hanji sat next to their son at the table and participated in conversation as if she and Levi had never had their falling out. Eren was pretty sure that Levi had screamed something along the lines of, "Get the hell out of my house, you goddamn four eyes, I never want to see your stupid ass face again," when she had told them the unfortunate news about being unable to have a second child, so seeing Hanji at the dinner table felt like a bizarre dream. Was someone watching them? Was this a prank? Was Moblet hiding somewhere taking notes for some strange experiment Hanji had thought up? His confusion turned into near panic when Levi said his son didn't need to take a bath that night and could go straight to changing into pajamas and playing with Hanji in the living room. When the little boy came back downstairs in a comfortable set of pajamas, Hanji was wearing her own pajamas and had finished lying sheets and pillows on the living room floor. "See Mia, sweetheart," she said cheerfully. "Let's make a pillow fort to sleep in." Levi just nodded. "Well, have fun, don't stay up too late." He bent down and gave his son a kiss. "Good night, baby, see you in the morning." "Good night," his son replied as Levi gave him his Titan plush. Levi then proceeded to grab Eren's arm and drag him upstairs to their room while telling him to stop doing his best fish impression. Once they were alone, Hanji and the boy went to work putting their fort together. Hanji brought the chairs in from the dining room and draped sheets over them. Once they had the basic stretcher, she and the boy furnished it with all the pillows they could find, creating 2 nest-like areas for them to sleep. The whole time, Hanji smiled and spoke in her friendliest voice. The boy steadily smiled back, feeling more and more comfortable being around her. When they were done, they settled inside the fort and cuddled up with the pillows. Hanji pulled paper and pens out of her bag along with a beat-up rag doll. "This was my favorite toy when I was your age," she explained, setting it down next to a pillow so it could sit upright. "It's not really a titan, but it doesn't really look like a human either, does it? But I didn't really play with dolls indoors. I was more of the outdoors type. I like to play in the mud and look for bugs. But this doll, yeah, I don't know what it is, but I liked it." The boy smiled at her story. "My toy is a titan," he explained back. "It's Daddy's titan fawn." Hanji's eyes widened slightly. She had heard that the secret was out, so she had been unsure of how to approach that subject. "Are you okay with that?" she asked. The boy shrugged. "It scared me when I first saw it. It scared me real bad because I had this nightmare about a year ago where Daddy turned into a really bad titan and ate Papa and wanted to eat me. Then we went outside the walls for Papa and Daddy's anniversary, and some really bad people attacked us and brought titans with them, so Daddy transformed to save us. I was really scared when that happened, really sad and angry and confused and scared. And I thought I never wanted to see Daddy and Papa again because everyone except me knew. But then I thought that, if Daddy was bad, he wouldn't play with me and tell me stories and tuck me in at night and give me hugs and kisses, so, yeah, it's a little weird, and his titan is scary looking in real life, but Daddy is still Daddy. He loves me and takes care of me." Hanji hummed an understanding. "That's a good way to think about it. Just because something is scary looking doesn't mean it's bad. Some people think your papa looks scary, but we both know he's a good person." The boy shrugged again but then nodded. "Papa is only scary looking when he's angry." Hanji laughed. "Yup, even I think he's scary when he's angry." "Hey, Aunt Hanji." Why have you never hugged me?" Hanji took in a quiet, sharp breath, eyes somewhat hurt as she looked away for a moment. Thankfully, the child before her was patient and just hugged his toy waiting for her to speak. When she looked back at him, his eyes were full of curiosity, but he also looked like he would understand if Hanji refused to answer his question. "She didn't though. I made an agreement with your papa before you were born," she explained, sitting upright. "Here's the thing, and it's kind of a long story, but my primary job within the Survey Corps is to study titans, not kill them. I'm basically head of the science department, so I do a lot of scientific experiments to see what I can find out. I've done a lot of experiments with your daddy, and they've helped the Survey Corps learn more about normal titans. Now we know that his titan abilities let your papa have you, so I wanted to study your papa and you to see what else I could learn. But your papa, he thought that I'd use you for experiments even if you said no, even if you were a little baby and couldn't say no. You'd never do that to me though, right?" the boy interrupted, voice high-pitched and terrified. Hanji shook her head and smiled. "I would never do that. I would never make you be in an experiment if you didn't want to. I would never force you to do anything you didn't want to do." "Then why?" "Your papa wanted to protect you. It didn't matter what I said. He made me promise not to touch you at all. I couldn't even hug you. What could I do? You're your papa's baby, so he gets to decide how to raise you." The boy was quiet for a few seconds. "Aunt Hanji. Please hug me." And she did. The rest of the evening was filled with stories, drawing, quiet giggles, and Hanji writing in her notebook. When the boy asked her about the notebook, she just smiled and said that she had a few ideas she wanted to jot down. The boy didn't argue, as he was awake way past his bedtime and was utterly exhausted, falling asleep mere moments later. Hanji rode for a few more minutes before falling asleep next to him. When Levi came downstairs the next morning, he found Hanji standing in front of the stove. She turned when she heard his footsteps stop. "Good morning," she said. "Sorry, I woke up early and couldn't get back to sleep, so I made tea. I hope you don't mind. You didn't use the stuff in the silver box in the back corner of the second cabinet, did you?" "No, I used the stuff in the bottom cabinet in the cloth bag." "Oh good, that's the cheap stuff." "Yeah, okay, you can have some of that." Just as he said that, his kettle started to whistle, and Hanji took it off the fire and poured its contents into a cup before the noise could wake the still sleeping child in the living room. Levi poured himself a cup, let it cool for a minute, took a sip, and said, "Chen, it's not poison." Hanji's smirk was short-lived as she turned her head to look at the drawings hanging on the kitchen wall. She heard Levi sip at his tea behind her, and she took a long sip of her own. They stood there quietly, turned away from each other, and a heavy tension hung in the air. Hanji spoke first. "You were right." Levi shut his eyes tightly and turned his head away. "Huh? Eren and Levi's kid?" Wimmy asked. She stood in the doorway of her and Historia's home, the little blonde next to her. "HN, haven't really spent a lot of time with him, to be honest. Wish I could though. I mean, I don't know crap about all that Levi getting pregnant by a Titan shifter thing, which is weird because I, really should, why no. You shouldn't have kept bothering them at Levi's birthday party, Historia deadpanned. That was one time. And you shouldn't have showed up at the house uninvited and tried to host a baby shower. Not my fault those idiots didn't do the whole "we are gonna have a baby so give us lots of gifts" thing right. Historius nodded. Wimmy sighed dramatically. "Yeah, I don't know what to tell you, Hanji. Only thing we do know is that the kid behaves himself like you wouldn't believe. I mean, sure, he's a kid, so he has his temper tantrums every once in a while, but when they're out in public, the kid barely makes a peep. He doesn't complain about wanting to go home, he holds either Ern's or Levi's hands the whole time, and he waits patiently for everything. Historia and I don't want kids, but if we got stuck with one, I'd pray to a whole bunch of gods I don't believe in that the brat would turn out like the Jaeger kid." Historia smiled sarcastically. "So what Wimia is saying is that he's the opposite of her." I wish I could spend more time with him," Mikasa admitted as the two sat across from each other in Hanji's lab. "From what I've seen, he's a very understanding and accepting child. He doesn't make people explain anything to him if they look uncomfortable. Maybe that's it, he's good at reading people. He understands people's emotions. He can tell how a person is feeling right away. It's interesting because a lot of adults have a hard time with that, but he knows when to press the issue and when to stop talking. Like, after I took Ern out to eat for his birthday, we went back to his place and I was kinda teary-eyed. I was expecting the boy to say something, but he didn't. It was almost like he knew that I didn't want to talk about it at that moment. I don't know if that answers your question, Hanji, but that's what I've noticed. If nothing else, the kid isn't judgmental at all." Jean took a sip of his drink and stared at the bar's ceiling for a few seconds. He then looked back down at his drink and sighed. "Sorry, I'm so used to ordering 2 drinks that it's weird only ordering one for myself now. I pour Marco a shot once in a while at home, but I've stopped ordering him drinks when I'm out. The kid helped me start to heal though, as crazy as that sounds. He's a good listener. He grasped the concept of a guardian angel right away and didn't judge me for believing in such things. The guys looked at me like I was nuts every time I brought it up, so I stopped talking to them about it, but the kid just sat there and listened and accepted my beliefs. I don't know if that's out of the ordinary or anything, since I guess kids tend to be more accepting than adults, but I think it's worth noting." "Why? You up to some experiment, Hanji? I can only hope our kid is half as well behaved as Eren and Levi's kid. Jean's always going on about guardian angels, right? That kid's the real angel." Connie set a tray of bread and jam on the side table next to where Sasha sat in their living room and then leaned on his wife's chair, facing Hanji. "Of course I'll love my kid no matter what, but the good behavior would be a great bonus." Especially when it comes to bedtime, Sasha added as she took a piece of bread from the tray. The thing that really stood out to me was that he's never protested sleep while staying with us. Whenever we said it was time to sleep, he never put up a fight, even if he wasn't tired. She spread some jam on the bread and popped a piece of it into her mouth. I mean, that could just be him behaving for us, but I don't think he's a hassle at home. Connie shrugged. That probably doesn't mean anything though. Sasha shook her head. No, it might, she replied, taking another piece of bread from the tray, because he understands that sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do. Like when Eren and Levi left for the expedition. Connie, you didn't see it because you had left early that morning, but, as much as the boy didn't want his parents to go, he knew they had to. He understood that their job was important. She shoved the bread in her mouth, turned back to Hanji, and, through her stuffed cheeks, said, I think that means something. You should have heard the stories he told us one night we babysat him, Armin said as he passed a cup of water to Hanji, who sat across from him and Annie at the kitchen table. Annie nodded. I've never heard of someone having as wild an imagination as he does. Armin only read him a few sentences out of his book, and, the next minute, the kid is creating whole worlds for us to explore. He thought up more stuff than what was written in that book. Armin suddenly turned timid. Please don't tell anyone this, Hanji, but I have a book about the outside world. My grandpa gave it to me years ago, before he died. He actually thought up different plants and animals and terrain for multiple places, and he continued, barely noticing that Armin had spoken. Her eyes widened as she spoke, as if she was suddenly realizing something. Like he thought up things I've never heard of, but each one made sense. I don't know how to explain it. It's almost like he knows how big the world is, like he knows how big it is in comparison to the world within the walls. And it doesn't scare him at all. Annie. She looked up at her boyfriend, eyes still slightly wide. Sorry, she murmured, I just go talk to Reina and Berthold, Hanji, and tell them everything we told you. Oh my God, you noticed it, too. Reina exclaimed, stopping midway as he attempted to lead Hanji from the front door to the kitchen table. He stared at Hanji with wide eyes, and his jaw dropped. I knew it, I knew something was up with that kid, he continued quietly, slowly shaking his head. Berthold stood at the kitchen counter with a pitcher of iced tea, the ice making small striking noises as he trembled. Reina and I noticed that after playing with him one day last winter, he said, a tinge of nervousness in his voice. He understood anxiety and depression and how relationships work and could tell so much just from talking to me for a few minutes. He saw right through me. I was so scared he was gonna figure out my Titan. The kid is too damn smart, Reina nearly hissed. He's too damn smart for his age. There must be something. Wait. He stared at Hanji as if he had just had a groundbreaking epiphany. Hanji, what if? I knew that Eren's Titan powers had an effect on me post-pregnancy, Levi said, still looking away from his guest. His powers let me get pregnant in the first place, but, as soon as I did, they fought to protect me from the foreign being inside my body, which is why I was so sick. That's just it though, they are protecting me. He's protecting me. Most women don't survive C-sections. Not only did I survive, but I recovered in a few weeks, whereas if a woman does survive one, she needs months to recover. And then I only needed a few weeks to fully recover after that Titan bit me on the expedition. Levi looked down into his teacup, staring at his reflection in the dark liquid. Eren's Titan powers are protecting me not just from another pregnancy, but also from injuries and sicknesses. And our son, the powers have their own effect on him. If I say that he's growing up too fast, I mean it. Eren walked into the kitchen at that moment, eyes wide awake and shocked at what he had heard from the hallway. Hanji turned back towards them. Yes, she said, keeping her eyes steadily focused on them, his brain is developing at a rate faster than the average human's. Knock knock. The trio of adults turned towards the front door, pausing for a moment until Eren couldn't stand the tension anymore and ran to answer it. When he opened the door, his eyes widened further out of surprise. Mikasa, what? Sorry, his sister panted heavily. She wiped her forehead with one hand and held out an envelope with the other. Her skin was pale and her eyes were pink with the beginnings of bags underneath them. Sorry, Eren, I've been up all night and I just came straight here from Stohas. Stohas? Eren asked in disbelief. You rode non-stop from Walsinner all night. Mikasa motioned for him not to fuss over her and then pointed to the envelope. Hanji and Levi joined them at the front door just as Eren opened it. He held it low enough so all three of them could read it, and their eyes widened simultaneously. They stared back at Mikasa, who swallowed hard and wiped her brow again. Supreme Commander Darius Zaklai is dead. Deputy Supreme Commander Owen Smith is Supreme Commander now.